tonight, and then we'll talk later because we have additional folks to interview at the next meeting. Centron Felder. Oh, come on up, Centron. What we ask you to do is to come on up to the table. Tell us why you've applied to the Police Community Engagement Board and what you'll bring to the table.
Okay, again, my name is Centron Felder. I live in the Webster area for about 7 years. I'm located as a part of my service outstanding side of the regarding the board, I like the mission of collaboration and working with the community as a law enforcement. I spent several years as a career working with law enforcement as a member of law enforcement, and I understand that was 15 years ago. And so we're in a different time now and a different era in how individuals respond to the police and how police respond to individuals. And I feel like having a diverse background would help me bridge that connection and help with the outreach programs that law enforcement might offer to schools, the community at large. I think I bring a lot to the table in that.
Does anyone have any questions?
Did I see that your profession is as a school counselor?
I'm a school psychologist currently.
Psychologist, okay, thank you very much.
I work downtown St. Louis Language Immersion School.
Okay. Cool. Seems like a good professional perspective as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, and you speak more than one language.
I hear more than one language every day. Only fluent in English.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank
you.
you very much.
Yeah,
thanks.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Our next interviewer is Sandra Mudd. Sandra, same thing. We're going to ask you to come on up to the table and tell us why you've applied and what you'll bring to the table.
Good evening. I applied to it because I think that this is a serious gap that we've had in our society that really needs to be the two sides kind of brought together if possible. And I know it's possible, but I mean, whatever means we can take to try to do that is important. The only thing I can bring to it is I have 35 years experience in community involvement in one form or another, most of it in the city of St. Louis, which is one of the reasons I put off getting involved in Webster growth, because it seems like so vastly different from, I mean, the city, you can walk out your door and you can find a cause. Here they're more hidden.
Yes.
And I am anxious to, I wish I could say I had all the answers for you, but I would really like a chance to work towards that goal.
Thank you. Let's
Thank
see if
you,
anybody
Sandra.
else, does anybody have a question for Sandra? Thank you. Thank you for your interest in coming forward. And those are our two interviews.
We have two more. Ma'am.
Oh, okay. Are Corin Parcell and Paul Dietrich, they're
Correct.
here tonight. Okay, Corin, Corinne or Corin?
It is Cory.
Corin, come on up. You've applied for Green Space. Tell us a little bit about why and what you'll bring to the table.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. So I grew up across from Larson Park. Spent my whole young life playing in Larson Park. So enjoying the green spaces of Webster is something I've been doing since I was 1. And my father helped maintain Larson Park back in the 80s and 90s a little bit, some of the front plantings. And I thought that that was really exciting, that he was able to do that when I was 10 or something. Now it's been 30 years and I've moved back to Webster. I've been here a few years. And I feel like I'd like to offer the same thing, help to maintain spaces here and see what we can do to keep these available spaces thriving in Webster. In terms of what I bring to the table, I've been doing forest restoration with volunteer groups for a few years now. I do invasive species removal. I have training in ethnobotany and paleoethnobotany, so a diverse grasp of plants as well. So hopefully I can provide some useful perspective to the commission.
Great.
I'm impressed that
Thank
you
you,
were
Cory.
agreeing to the green space.
Yeah.
This was planned, it's true.
Design thinking there.
Webster Grove.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad that you're,
Yeah.
that you're doing this.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Corin. We'll
All
let
right.
you know.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Paul Dietrich? has applied for the community engagement board. Paul?
For which one? Which board, Mayor?
Police Community Engagement Board.
Yeah, my name is Paul Dietrich. I've lived here in Webster for about 40 years. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I specialized in police and public safety psychology. So this is a topic, community relations and with the police that I've been interested in for a long time. I've taught at the police academies on stress management and wellness in police, and I've taught and done continuing ed classes on implicit bias. So my wife and I have raised 2 children here. We have 2 grandchildren here. So this is a way for me to be involved in our community in a way that I think I have some special interests and experience in.
Are there any
Thank you, Paul.
questions?
Paul, did you apply the first
I did,
round?
I
Okay, I
did.
recognize you.
Yeah.
Good to see you again. Thanks.
Well, maybe this time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know what, I do have a question, and actually if each of the people, the individuals that applied for police community engagement board can answer it, but I don't know if you've had a chance to read the charter. And my question would be, what do you feel, how do you feel the police community engagement board could be most effective for the city?
Well, I think the primary function is to promote or enhance communication between members of the community and the police. I think there are many different ways to do that. You know, I think, they can be simple things like doing a lot more ride-alongs with police, you can do, I know we've done some, I don't know how it would work here in Webster, but we've had community academies where you're teaching the community what police do. I know I was involved with the, let's see if I can remember the name of it, the women that did the talk. These were Black women that talked about the talk that they gave to their sons, about dealing with the police. And I was involved with them and got them to come to the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Academy. It was a great experience. I think this was for recruits. And it was good for the women too, to see how idealistic police can be, at least when they first start. And so I think there are all sorts of things you can do like that. But the more, in some areas, they've had police going around handing out things like baseball cards or, meal, coupons, anything that breaks the pattern, what I think the problem that happens is people get caught in these patterns of interacting with each other in certain ways, and they have expectations then of how each party is going to interact with them. And so if you can break out of those patterns, I think that's good for everybody. So
Thank you.
lots of different ways.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if either of the other 2 candidates would like to answer that question as well, if they're. The question was, so I'm not sure if you have been able, have the ability to read the charter yet, but my question is basically, how do you feel the board, the Police Community Engagement Board, could be most effective for the community?
I think the most effective use of the board would be to encourage interaction between the community and police in general. I know a lot of times the interactions, there's a tenseness on both sides, and I think that part of that is because that might be the first time you've interacted with a police officer. And then if you're a young Black male, you've got all the media behind you in terms of what you may think of the person who's at that point interviewing you or arresting you, whatever. So I feel like if we can get officers to engage earlier, elementary level, like children, to see that the officer's primary goal is safety, is to keep everyone safe and not to look at them as the boogeyman or any in a negative light. They have a job to do. Give them the benefit of the doubt that they're all doing it to the best of their ability. So I think having that interaction as early as possible and continue would be beneficial. And I think as part of the board, we can maybe help facilitate some of those interactions, give ideas in terms of mentorship opportunities. I know officers are busy, but maybe if some of them could commit some of their personal time as well, or even on the clock. However, we could work it out. But I think the early engagement, often and consistent, would be something that the board could help facilitate.
Okay, and then my final question would be, what do you, and so you can answer this one too, what do you think the board's role is?
Well, the board, I mean, I've not had the opportunity to sit on a board like this, but my understanding based on the chart is that there's no enforcement. It's all this, we advise the chief of police and his officers, give them what we would think would be good advice, and then it's up to him and his team to decide whether or not to implement that advice, but not to at any point have any enforcement ability or anything like that.
Okay, do you think we could get Sandra up for one last time and then we can move on?
I'll be sure.
Thank you.
To me, the board needs to develop means of communications between the, I say two sides, but it sounds worse than, well, maybe not. And hopefully develop relationships and communication and trust. You got to work for the relationships and the trust. And you can only do that by communicating and getting to know one another.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. Karen, if you don't mind, I think we're going to move on.
That's fine.
Is that okay with you? Good. Because is there anything on the regular agenda? If not, then we're going to go around with updates, and I'll just start on my left with Laura tonight.
Sure. I guess if you don't mind, so no one yells at me about not using the microphone. The Business Development Commission met last week. Presentation and discussion with SG Collaborative about Douglas Hill. As I understand it, they are preparing a letter endorsing the project that we as council should receive this week. The Business Roundtable has been rescheduled for November 18th at 8:30 a.m. at Webster University. There are a number of reasons for the rescheduling, but also we may know more about the rules, which is always helpful when you're trying to figure out what to do. I enjoyed Make a Difference Day and appreciate everybody who came out. I spent some time in the Shady Grove Nature Sanctuary, and then also attended the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance Technical Advisory Group, which is a really big mouthful, to talk a little bit about Douglas Hill and hear what some of their questions were as well, and that was helpful. And that's it for me.
Nothing there.
Karen?
The library is doing some really interesting things. And one of the things I learned that they've been doing is a regular food drive. Typically, they did them during National Library Month, but since COVID, they've been doing it on a regular basis, and then they deliver the food to Webster Rock Hill Ministries. So one of the things that they've been doing is, in lieu of paying your library fines, donate some canned goods or what have you. And that's been accumulated on, and each week then they take it to Webster Rock Hill Ministries. And I thought that was really interesting. And then one of the other things was that there's been the St. Louis County and St. Louis City libraries are speaking about joining together so that they basically exchange each other's resources. And actually, Webster wasn't invited to participate in that, and they kind of like asked about it, but one of the primary benefits would be one of the biggest increases in usage has been through books on tape, audio books. And Webster doesn't have a very big resource for that, and it would allow them to tap into that. So that's one of the things that they are looking into potentially collaborating with the city and county for that.
Thank you. Just a few updates. The holiday party for employees is November 18th at Blackburn Park. We're really looking forward to that. Hopefully, council as you can could drop in as well. And let's see, fire chief interviews were yesterday. We had 5 highly qualified candidates, was really excited about it. A huge thanks to the community members that participated on the panel as well. If you have not had an opportunity to respond to my email about your availability on November 17th, please do. I'd like to get you involved in that. And December 9th is the date that council selected with the help of Katie to host a community engagement forum on Douglas Hill. We'll be doing that at Parks and Rec Center. We'll get some information out to the community on save the date, and we'll work with council more to see exactly what that event looks like, how we want to host it. Kiosks, have people at different places, but we'll start getting more information on that. So that's all. Thank you, ma'am.
Can I ask a
Oh,
question
yes.
about that? Obviously, I missed the last council meeting. What's the purpose of the December 9th forum?
So the council decided that they wanted another opportunity to engage with the community and hear directly, rather than just being like a public comment forum, but to have, I think, casual conversation that's better suited for council to answer. But I believe that's the goal.
What more information do we need?
Speaking of council or public?
Either. I guess what I'm asking is, what's the purpose of this meeting on December 9th?
To give the public another opportunity to address the council, whatever comments you might have. And with this type of venue, we'll be able to have a conversation versus just a one-way comment.
Haven't we done that throughout this process? Like, is this like the end result? Like, I mean, is that what we're asking? I'm just confused. Like, I'm happy to hear from the citizens at any time. And we've obviously had a ton of public hearings and we kept them open and everything.
When citizens speak up at the podium during their public comment, as council, we don't respond to their questions or to their comments. We just listen and then we move to the next comment. This gives us an opportunity to have dialogue with the community.
It's to have a dialogue and just other, more relaxed setting. What's the purpose?
We have put so much on city council, city staff's plates. We have a lot on our plates. We've done, I think, everything that's in our prerogative in order with this Douglas Hill thing. I don't understand the purpose of it. Obviously, I'm outnumbered here and I'm fine with ending this conversation. I just don't understand what we're doing.
I think anytime we have the ability to enhance communication, we should take it.
I quite frankly am having a little bit of trouble with timing, because that's really December and there's one more meeting in December. And I think if we're going to do any voting on TIF, we're going to do any voting on rezoning. Won't that happen before that meeting?
So if I may, thank you, Madam Mayor. Staff is happy to do whatever council would like. I thought at the last meeting it was pretty unanimous that everybody wanted that. And I don't want to speak for Katie. I think December 9th may have just been the availability that people had. I don't think there was any intention in having it that far out.
It
So
was the only available date that was.
So I think the question then would be either let's not have it, or if council desires to have it, is there something earlier than December 9th? Because that wasn't the case.
You could switch the strategic planning, which is at the end of November.
I'm happy to switch whatever.
It just seems like our time would be better suited dealing with Larry and SG Collaborative on the redevelopment. Because Larry's refusing to answer questions that he keeps saying are in the redevelopment plan, and that's the meat and potatoes. I would rather spend council's time and negotiate if we're gonna go forward with this Douglas Hill.
Okay, the rest of the council, how strongly do you feel that number one, that we need to do this, that we need another forum for exchange with the public? If we don't, do we feel strongly about that at this point? B, if we feel strongly, is it better to push it back to November? or
What was the
Again.
other date, Katie, that you said could be
the
switched?
30th.
The 30th.
The 30th of November. I mean, I think we need to hear from all of the council members about how you feel about this. Is this a necessary thing to do? Have we given the public ample opportunity to hear from them? Come on, feedback. We
Well, I
know how-
definitely think it should be before. I mean, because my next question was gonna be, if we're doing that on December 9th, what are we doing on the 30th? I'm sorry, I'm getting these dates.
We're doing the strategic
up.
planning on the 30th.
Okay,
But that then, if it's done on November 30th, it's before the 2 meetings in December. Otherwise, this is so late in the process to do this. Is it still valuable to do it? I don't know. I know how,
I understand what David's saying, but the reason that I think it's value is because we're constantly getting feedback that we're not listening to people. And that people don't have an opportunity to say anything. And that, you know, and then too, the difference between being talked at and talked with. So from that perspective, you know, I think that it wouldn't hurt. Could be beneficial to have another opportunity. But I think December the 9th is too late. I would think that November 30th should be when we do that.
about the rest of you.
I'm gonna echo Karen. I forgot to say, I had office hours last night, sat in Fredco and had a lovely conversation with some people. And there were a few people there who have not appeared any other place and said they weren't comfortable making a public hearing comment. And so I agree that a different forum is good for people to have that opportunity, but I also agree that let's switch the dates because I do think that December date's too late.
That's fine.
Fine with the rest of you?
Yes, I mean, I do see a value in a different type of, I think just based on the schedule and being quarantined and in our own homes through a lot of this process, I think it would be beneficial for us to open up another way for people to speak. And for us, instead of being here in this formal setting to talk about some of the things that we have on our mind to communicate.
All right, sounds like we're gonna switch things
Switch.
around and do this on November 30th, okay?
Happy to do that. It doesn't have to be discussion now, but I also hear the pressure of so many dates and holidays are closing in. Everybody's got other things to do. If December 9th for strategic planning does not work out, we can find other dates after the first of the year. So we'll hold December 9th, but should that need to change?
But my vote is to move it until after the
Yeah,
first of
I'm
the
gonna
year.
suggest, not just for us, but also for staff.
Exactly.
We need to stress. this
I
as well.
would highly agree to take the strategic planning into next year and take that off the plate. There's too much going on right now.
Absolutely.
All right, and if we need to, we can always have some set up here in City Hall if the rec center is not available to be able to do that kind of visitation. We've got a lot of space around here that we can figure it out.
Thank you.
Okay,
Katie, would you send us an email?
Surely.
Thank you.
I will still send you a calendar.
Good.
I love it, I love it, I love it.
one down and one change. All right, Emerson, what do you have?
The only comment I have is just to remind the public that the Webster Rockville Ministries is starting to hold its holiday giving. So we appreciate all the support the community has given us in past years. I hope it'll be there this year. Asking community members to provide us with gift cards to Schnucks, Aldi's for food purchases for our clients and for the Christmas holidays with same with food gift cards and gift cards with Target to purchase gifts for the kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can be matched to a family if you'd like to go about it that way as well.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you,
okay.
Laura.
Last week I sat in on the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance Technical Advisory Committee
You
meeting,
say it so much better.
along with members of staff and the Green Space Advisory Commission. And it was a good conversation, and I think they're going to be following up with more, and I will update, or Lauren, maybe we'll update later, once we have more on that.
Okay, I just wanted to say that we're composting pumpkins. I was looking up the location because I
yeah.
forgot
Yeah.
where those
So
are.
it's-
Mossfield parking lot.
It's Mossfield parking lot. Thank you. I just wrote that note too.
Yeah.
10 a.m. to 1 p.m. I'll
What?
be there from noon to
On
1 if you
Saturday.
wanna come say
On
hi.
this coming
This
Saturday.
coming Saturday.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Sarah.
Sure. That's it for me.
Okay. Make a Difference Day, we had hundreds of people out this year who did fabulous community service projects all over the city. It was so heartwarming to see so many people out there doing such good things. Police Community Engagement Board met, and we're still discussing some of the recommendations and the rewrite that came from the Alliance. And we'll continue that as we go along, and we are looking for new members. I was part of a mayor's panel at the Missouri History Museum, which was so much fun. It was great fun. Learned a lot from each other, but we had a good time. The Arts Commission met this morning, and they're working on plans for next year, and they're going to invite Scott Davis to their next meeting because they want to talk about some things, ideas that they have that might be useful in the redo of Ivory Crockett Park that might be kind of fun for people. We got a piece here from the Historical Society that I get to recommend somebody to be on that board. So if you have some recommendations that you could give me, I would really appreciate that. And we'll see who there is who might be willing to join the Historical Society. And then finally, I've had a request from Clark Hoteling to do something like naming or participating in the day in which Indigenous peoples are honored. And you can see across the street at the Congregational Church, they have a sign there. And I have a piece from the New York Times that I'm happy to share with you that gives the background on Indigenous Peoples Day. That's something that we might talk about at some point. It's not for another year or something yet. So, he has brought that forward, and we really should consider that. All right.
And one thing I forgot, the Sustainability Commission is going to think I totally fell down on the job. Because also on November 10th from 8 to 9 at the rec center, there will be an open house. It's at night, not in the morning. An open house to get feedback about the sustainability plan. So
Yeah.
October, wrong month, November 10th.
I had a good visit also with two of the sustainability folks. They're working on their plan, and they're trying to talk to a lot of you, and it's a fun conversation too. All right, I missed Neil. Do you have anything?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go ahead with our regular agenda topics tonight. And the first is the personnel policy update. And I think that goes to you, Marie.
Yes, ma'am, and I will be quick. So you all saw it in my Friday update. Employees all were alerted this past Thursday, but I'm proud to share that we have implemented a new domestic violence personnel policy. It provides for up to 2 weeks of unpaid leave per year for employees or household members who are victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. This is a required policy as a result of Missouri legislature passing it. Other than being required, though, it is just the right thing to do. So that has went into effect, and I'd like to thank Chandler Culkin, who's sitting in the back, but our HR manager, for quickly working and getting that put together. So just wanted to share that.
May I just also say, I appreciate the policy a lot. There's a lot of quote undue burden from the city. So can we, whenever possible, err on the side of our staff in that particular undue burden text?
Absolutely.
I know that's lawyer speak.
And I do a couple of questions, but I'll ask you about them later. It seems as though this applies to all members of your family. There's a section in there, and I just wondered how far that family extended for those of us who have.
It's
Lots of
actually pretty
nieces.
broad because we all define family a little bit different. And that's one of the things I appreciate about the policy, because those
So-
things impact family differently.
Okay, so if you have a niece or a nephew somewhere,
Certainly.
okay, that's what I was curious about. All right, American Rescue Plan funding, Eric, you're on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members. We have,
It's okay, I can see that.
It's easier for me to see this one here too, Jerry.
so we just have a few slides. I'll find my mouse here and then a little demonstration to give you, but this is a review of what we'll discuss tonight, where things are at with ARP in relation to Webster Groves. quick review of our eligible uses, talk about balancing act, some technology expenditures, and then just really the meat of this is discussion with you about the American Rescue Plan. So just briefly, as you know, $4.6 million coming to the city of Webster Groves, 2.3 million. That bottom number has been received and is deposited into its own fund here at the city. It was received on September 17th. So that money is in hand at this time. The next payment of that will be a year from now. So next September, we'll get that other 2.3. And then, of course, any cities in Missouri that do not decide to take the funds, that will go back into a pool and that same formula will be dispersed. So we may have a few more dollars that flow out that way. And there are cities that are refusing the funds. Generally rural and smaller,
Don't
but
take it.
so.
We should start a campaign. With this market.
So the eligible uses of the funds for ARP. Pandemic effects, I boiled all the big lingo, the legal language down for you, just to review again. COVID-19 public health emergency costs or negative economic impacts. And so there are lots of rules around that, but that's the general category number one. Category number two is premium pay for eligible workers or grants to outside employers for their eligible workers for premium pay. Premium pay is not wage replacement, it is wage addition. It is extra pay, recognizing having to have been involved in essential work. So it's not like the CARES Act where we can back out budget dollars and such like that. Revenue loss is our most flexible category. This is anything that's affected by revenue loss, and they're just applying all revenue loss for the period of the pandemic to, it must be a COVID impact. So we can use this flexible number of $2 million and some $7,000 there. That is ours to use as we would choose in line with the eligible uses. So I mean, but very flexible and our biggest pot of money that is readily available. Infrastructure, then water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. I know there is conversations and welcome to everything going on in Capitol Hill about can we get roads and regular infrastructure in. As I was Councilmember Arnold laid out there, everything in DC is a little screwed up right now, but a couple things. As of earlier last week, roads and such might have been in, and then they were out, and then they were in again, and then they were out again. The final rule from Treasury, which of course is the full compliance set that we are looking for and what Councilwoman Arnold was talking about in terms of the business roundtable, is not yet published. But because of the wrangling on Capitol Hill, Treasury might be expediting that because that may be a key piece to get some votes lined up on the Hill. So we are expecting the final rule quickly. That could change right now as we talk, right? I mean, so please caveat all my what could happen in DC conversation with.
You know where Joe Manchin is?
Yeah, right. So
As of 5:30, he was a no.
if Manchin's a yes, then you have three other no's to deal with. So you've got to work through all that. So, but again, I just want to highlight this $2 million number and we'll come back to that, but think of that. That is your flexible number. Okay, that is the number. I don't want to call it play money, but your thoughts and your desires about ARP, that's the number that's really available. That doesn't have all the guidelines around it, the real strict guidelines. Okay. So the American Rescue Plan is for the city, unlike our normal budget process. It is a budget that we're asking you to create, allocations, appropriations, but it's not, we do a fire service, so we know we have to put money in it. We have a police service. This is things that we don't normally do. One-time costs or even ongoing if we want to start those programs. So this is someplace where staff can't just sort of fill the numbers in, you know, thinking that there's policy direction to do these programs. We really need this conversation with you and the community about what is the value that this community could see from these funds. So in that conversation, as we look ahead, especially with engagement and to the conversation about Douglas Hill, Balancing Act is a program the city now has. It's a very cheap program, and I'm going to walk through a couple examples, but it helps to gather through digital engagement, community input into quantitative data about budgets, okay, which is very tough to do because it lets people balance their own budget, or in the case of ARP, decide how they want to spend it, and then that quantifies, and we can use that data to really help drive our decisions here. Again, with holidays, Douglas Hill going on, the pandemic, other things, it's a real easy opportunity to not have to bring people together and try to find a date. So I want to give you a couple examples, and I hope my share function will work correctly here for everyone on Zoom. But this is, I believe, Greensboro, North Carolina. This is balancing act. And so as you see, this little pop-up comes up, and I'm just going to walk through this, and this will come up when we implement ours. And we click continue, it asks if we're a resident, and we can click yes or no, and we can decide all these questions, and it sort of gathers data about us, and then it lets us in to this function. And by the way, we'll use this for the budget as well. We've got this for 5 years now, so we can help drive our own budget conversations. As you can see, Greensboro, North Carolina's revenue set 59.4 million. Ours here at the city would be 4.6. The revenue is set. What we're talking about is where did the money go? So here in Greensboro, as you see, unlike the eligible uses that the government has set out, they've set their own eligible sort of categories. Recovery assistance for community programs. You hover over it, you can find out what that information is. We'll just pull this up. If they want to give money to nonprofits, if I'm a citizen and want to show that, and I click the plus arrow, I've added $500,000 to nonprofits. 500,000 to local small businesses. I could come down and put a comment in here and add a comment and say, I want to give money to the Alliance for Interracial Dignity or the Webster Rock Hill Ministries, and add in recovery assistance, and I can save all that. The point being is, if you look up here, that number has moved since I added that million, this balancing bar, and it'll want to get to balance in the middle, which shows that you spent the money in the fund, okay? So this is just one example. I go to Larimer County, and you can see here, again, they have postal codes, so you can get the data right down to crosstabs almost and see where your community's at. You guys will just skip this actually real quick. There we go. They have set it up much like the buckets that the federal government and the law says, right? Public health response, negative impacts, infrastructure improvements. They've also set this aside. They've said, we've got 300,000 we're keeping for administration. You don't get to change that. Public. So it just takes it off the table and it moves this bar. So if I went in here to public health response and just said for vaccination and tracing, that just keep adding, you can see that top bar, you see how the green button keeps moving ever so slightly. We can do the same thing. And this is really what I wanted to demonstrate tonight is, as we talk about what potential uses, what are those ideas that the council is thinking of? We've heard some of them that we should add in, and what are things you don't want to add in? Are there things that will hold to the side as, restricted uses, I'll call them. We're going to say this amount of money goes for this purpose, and we're not going to change that. We're holding that in. We don't have to answer it fully tonight, but I want to start that conversation. So as we build this, we can roll this out and not be 8 months from now finally talking about how we spend ARP, right? Being engaged in that process. Everyone who submits this will get their own copy of it. And then also we get that data so that we can help inform your decision. So if we all think around this table that the right thing to do is put money in business, but our community overwhelmingly says we need to put money in the arts, we know that kind of feedback, and it helps inform your decisions. So that is balancing act. Again, we own it. We are ready to use it. It's a conversation for the budget as well, just as a heads up, as we deal with budget deficit, we can set the fund balance, and we know that ahead of time, and help the community help us decide. So if we face $1 million budget deficit, how are you going to get that to balance? You take it out of reserves, do you actually make some hard decisions and such as we move forward? And that I mean, literally it's for the year, I think it's just under $2,000. And all the data is all ours. We just submit, we put the questions in, they host it. It's a widget on our website. We drive people to it.
It doesn't look to me like they collect any demographic data.
They can on that first pop-up.
Okay.
We can decide how much demographic data. Those examples had very small, but we use this in Milwaukee County and we collected a lot. We also were able to distinguish then, we sent links to boards and commissions that were involved with the county. So people that sort of knew the county story got a certain link. The residents who hardly engaged with the county got a different link. So you can sort of see that if you're in the world of your local government and know what's going on, you see the difference in the data that you're getting back.
Very good.
That sounds great.
Sounds pretty good.
So this is, again, it's an easy tool for us to build and pull together, but also it's a way to drive engagement to get data for you and not just emails that you have to decipher, but really, bar graphs and statistical analysis on what will be helpful. So we also did here, speaking of potential designations of funds at this strategic planning, the importance of technology. That's one of the things I heard from you, and obviously IT has prepared some options for you. And so the real question that we're coming tonight is, do we want to designate some funds? Do you want us to get moving on technology and some of those things now and bring you official actions to approve? So just across the way here, you know, this adds up to 600,000. Wi-Fi and VPN are something we can do right now to put Wi-Fi in the city buildings, VPN access for employees. The computer purchase would be near the end of the next fiscal year when our lease is up and actually moving out of leased computers into purchased computers. That is a big one-time cost. Now we'll have to prepare the future year's budgets for replacement costs, right? But it's a potential great use of ARP in that regard on the one time. Cloud servers, I don't know if any of you ever been down to what I call the vault down in the basement. It's a big concrete room with a bunch of air conditioners where our servers are. We can move into the cloud, also online file storage, not only like we've talked about for regular, but also in our financial system, the Tyler Content Manager, ending the need for, you know, filing cabinets upon filing cabinets over in the attic, holding invoices. All those can go into the cloud. And then from Steve Bader and I's perspective, we need to invest in cybersecurity training. Since the new email system has come in, I have literally received 12 different emails spoofing Dr. People's name, trying to get me to approve fund transfers for grants. So because we want to be transparent and we put our emails out on the website for staff, people grab our email address, spoof them, and try to get staff to authorize things. Now, our staff have been great. We have not fell victim to that, but we need to train people for that, right? To look at emails and where they're coming from and all these other functionalities and deal with cyber. We don't have any training budget for cybersecurity involved at all in the organization. So this is from Steve and I and Dr. Peoples, our recommendation for a number can go up, can go down. You can talk about it as we talk about our discussion points, but looking forward, this was our bucket to say, if we're going to talk about technology, here's one. Now, most of this will come out of that 2 million. When I talked about your most flexible use, this is really 2 million. There may be a little bit we can get into economic impact because of public safety considerations on eligible use number 1. So really, again, conversation tonight, these are our 4 discussion points. Technology, do we designate an amount for technology investments and improvements? In revenue replacement, that $2 million, are we going to designate some for internal? Our comp and class considerations, if we're going to have, you know, potential salary increases that have to be dealt with, the one-time move on that could be done with the ARP funds. The ongoing years would have to be added into the general fund budget. Also infrastructure. We talked about city hall infrastructure, other physical infrastructures around the city, a very potential big area for that revenue replacement, $2 million. And then balancing act 3 and 4 are all about what do we put out to the public? What's off limits? If you don't want us to, you know, open up an opportunity on some regard, what do you want and not want in that public engagement? So that's the 4 points that I wanted to bring up and really engage in conversation with you about the opportunity.
Can I ask on the technology
Yep.
part, is any of that additional staff or personnel added? Because you're bringing in quite a bit of new.
No, it is not at this time. So, and Steve, we do, and we will probably in the next budget discuss what we're doing with IT staff and how we organize the department in a way to really deal with that. We have 1 network staff right now.
Right.
And if, I mean, the point being is it's a dangerous spot we're in. If, you know, hits by a bus,
Yeah.
we don't have a redundancy there on who knows our systems. Part of that is to go to the cloud because consultants can quickly move into cloud space and see things rather than legacy servers like we're operating on site here.
What do you want from us tonight? I mean, this sounds like, you know, the discussion of how to spend 4 million or $2 million is probably a weighty one that we should devote a good amount of time to.
I think, you know, if there are areas that are in the top of your mind on what you want in and out, we've heard things, housing repair programs, city hall infrastructure, technology, we've heard those types of things. We can develop some list of ideas. So think about that and anything that's on top of your mind. But then if you want us to move on technology, we just wanted to know, do you want us to bring official actions ready to move into that space and designate a fund, a portion of those funds for that? We wanted to double check because this will be our first expenditure really of these funds and wanted to make sure the council's in the same spot that we heard as staff. So.
Eric, I have a question
Yep.
about the revenue loss. Based on the infrastructure that we're trying to place in City Hall, And it's just not technology, it's roofs, floors, painting. Can any of these funds go towards that?
Absolutely. So that 2 million, I mean, even if you took the technology out of it, that 2 million could all be used for that kind of infrastructure. It's very flexible in that regard. The extra Baker Tilly packet I gave you also goes into, you know, really the guidance to move towards one-time costs, things that the general fund is not going to fund or has already been obligated to as a good way to get through compliance. So all the infrastructure could be out of that 2 million, many of those programs.
And some of, if we take care of some of the infrastructure costs out of these revenues, that will eliminate that cost in future budgets.
It would eliminate the capital improvement costs for those infrastructures. I want to be very clear that, you know, we can't just put the revenue replacement into the other fund balances. So we can't just backfill the general fund to take care of the structural deficit or the use of the general fund. That is, so it will eliminate those costs going forward, but it won't eliminate the structural deficit in the general fund.
Correct. Okay.
I looked at the Baker Tilly presentation and they referenced the EDA programs. Do we qualify? I looked at them briefly and couldn't really see a good place that we as a community would qualify for any of those.
It is highly unlikely.
Okay, that was sort of my read as well.
And I just, so when we go to eligible use number one, and we talk about communities' economic impact and such, we do not have a qualified census tract. We're very lucky to live in a community not affected in a great deal with, you know, poverty issues like many of our fellow sister cities and such. But that will change what we can qualify for usage of in that eligible use number one. And that's really one of the things we're waiting on the final rule. And about the business roundtable, do we have to actually see a COVID impact to a business to help them out in that, or is it assumed that there's a COVID impact? So
My second note to myself from that presentation was, you know, one of the things I talked about was coordination. Do we have any sense at this point about St. Louis County and their, you know, the mayor has heard, I have heard, County Executive Page make reference to his wanting to collaborate, but have they, do we know if they've set up any mechanisms for having those conversations?
none that I am aware of, ma'am.
We've completed a couple surveys.
Okay.
That's about how we would collaborate, what types of projects we would like to collaborate on, but there's been no feedback or invitations to meet after completing and providing that input.
Is there opportunity to collaborate with the school board at all? I wasn't sure kind of what entities, like how that would work, how that works across the types of entities, or if that's part of it. I think about walkability and all the issues that we're all kind of facing together.
Would it be helpful if we made a list of issues and
Yes.
needs to start with before we come up with our ideas, that we actually figure out what is it that we need?
Sure.
I think that might be a really good first start. I mean, I'd like to know more about the technology improvements than just a sum of money and a description.
I agree with you, Mayor. I like to, you know, I think they got the starting framework for the technology budget. I'd like to see a little bit more detail on what they're going to do with technologies and move with that just as quickly as we can, because that's what more do you need? There's a proposal that the Wi-Fi is going to cost this. Who's the provider? Who's the provider?
You want to go down to the next brass knuckle for the provider?
It's like any other proposal that we get for spending.
Sure, I mean, obviously we have to prove it, and we don't have authority to do that without us, but it seems to me that it's reasonable to go forward with all four of these things.
Well, that's what I
We
just
just got out of a pandemic, or we're in the middle of a pandemic, so where technology is of the utmost importance, and I think that if we're gonna look at the future of our workforce here at City Hall, we have to do all of this stuff.
That's what I just said. I said they have the framework for the technology. I just like to see more detail so we can act on it as quickly as possible.
So
Marie, when will we have information on the common class study? I know you
told us about that. It's upcoming.
So the next on-site meeting is November 22nd. Each of the department directors will meet again with the consultants to go through really the fine details, comparing job descriptions. All the comparisons with other local city municipalities has been done. It's having a sit-down conversation on a few of the job descriptions and making sure they line up apples to apples. So that's the next step. Before the end of the year, if we can get scheduling together, there will be a presentation from that consultant and they will deliver their
Okay.
recommendations.
But-
And there will be a financial cost to it. I mean,
Right.
So I agree with the mayor in part because looking at a list that you all are going to have things that you think of that I don't think of that I may find very important. And I think sitting and talking together doesn't necessarily generate that list in the same way in our minds, because we always end up down one rabbit hole or another. But also I would like to remind all of us to remember that, we have a lot of city staff, city hall needs, but we also have community needs, and this money is designed for the community as well as government, and let's make sure our list includes some of those things.
I'd like to know, how the community benefits from this $600,000. I mean, we have in here, for example, as Emerson is saying, some detail, we have $115,000, which includes public access. What does that mean? How are we going to do
That
that?
means, right, and that means if they go to the recreation complex, they may be able to then better utilize the facility because now they have Wi-Fi access and maybe they can.
So-
study.
But see, what we don't know is, does that include the recreation complex?
Yes, and there is
Those are
Wi-Fi.
the kind of details that I'm looking for. Does it include the service center?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think Emerson's asking for details, and so am I. I want to know what that means.
Yeah, and I think that detail help us make
Just
a
some more
decision.
detail.
Well, it also helps us structure balancing act, because I think that's an incredibly important tool. But, of the two that you put up there, the one that just sort of has the 4 categories from the ARPA, I'm not sure how helpful that is in terms of really tailoring this to our community. So if we can put a range of options in there and then get that feedback, I think that would be incredibly helpful.
So we can provide this detail. That's easy enough, especially for the internal needs and focusing on the infrastructure. How much would those cost be from a presentation that Mr. Ray with Public Works gave earlier? We can provide and repackage that information. Where it would really help us is hearing from council on your community interest. If we're spending that money externally in the community, what does that look like? So we can provide the internal package. We'd really like to hear from you on those other needs.
Okay. Right. So far, so good. And we'll just continue this conversation. We'll get more detail. Thank you, Eric,
ma'am.
Thank you,
very
Eric.
much.
Thank you for this.
Thank you, Eric.
Nice
Nice.
Yeah, that was
Very good,
helpful.
very well organized. Thank you. All right. The charter amendment petition. Who is going to address that?
Oh, I think that's probably me. This is actually on in 2 places. One is here, of course, and there is a resolution that I have suggested that is actually on your agenda for the council meeting. I can address it now, given the time, or I can address it in the general meeting, depending upon your choice.
I think addressing it now, because then I give us some time to talk about it. as a council.
All right, so there are, as you know, there were 2 amendments that have been proposed to the charter that have been suggested pursuant to Article 15 of our charter. I studied this in an effort to make sure that we had an absolutely unbiased opinion regarding this. We also submitted this to our prior attorney, which is David Struble, and I asked for his independent opinion. Having done my research and his research, I've submitted those things to you. It is my opinion, it is my opinion that the 2 proposed charter amendments are unconstitutional and illegal. And I will tell you why I think that. There is a provision in the Missouri Constitution, Article 6, Section 19A, which prohibits any city from enacting an ordinance or a charter amendment that conflicts with the Missouri Constitution, state statute, or the charter itself. So it means that all of these things must be consistent. They may not be inconsistent. Goes on, and there's a test that gets applied. There's a case called Whitaker versus the City of Springfield, which says in determining whether a charter provision violates Article 6, subsection 19A of the Missouri Constitution, the emphasis is whether it conflicts with the Constitution, state statute, or the charter itself. The test for determining if a conflict exists is whether the ordinance or the charter permits what the statute prohibits or prohibits what the statute permits. There's another case called State Action Hollywood Yellow Ribbon Commission versus Kloss. That's a relatively recent case. It is about 20 years old, but it is a case exactly on the point where Hazelwood was doing a development not unlike that which is proposed here. It had a TIF component, and there was an effort to amend the charter in Hazelwood in order to try and prevent this process from going through. And they failed because the charter amendments that they proposed, at least in part, were illegal. So the proposed amendments that we have right now are twofold. The first is a provision that would prohibit, or that would require any change in the uses permitted in residential districts in A1, A2, A3, A4, or any alteration to the stream buffer requirements of Section 83 of the City Code will not take effect and shall instead be submitted to the electors of the city to approve or reject at the polls. The referendum or any such ordinance shall be conducted as provided in Article 14, except that no petition shall be required to subject such ordinance or referendum. So this means simply that if you made any change as a council, made any change in any of the uses, that it must go to a vote of the people, which would mean that you would absolutely be unable to do any business. And it says uses. That includes things like CUPs. A conditional use permit is a change in the use. That would all have to go to a vote of the people. Every time you looked at a change in any one of the uses or any one of these sections, you would have to go to a vote of the people. Now, the amendment contradicts Section 2.12 of the Charter, which directs that, quote, unless otherwise specified, every ordinance shall become effective upon final passage. Section 2.12 deals with council's powers. This would absolutely contradict your power in that regard. Goes on, the amendment itself most likely contradicts Section 14.2 of the Charter by requiring two specific types of ordinances are automatically subject to the referendum process. Currently, the Charter provides that only certain ordinances are subject to the referendum process under the specific circumstances indicated in Section 14.2. In addition, it contradicts Section 11.3 of the Charter, which gives council the authority to, quote, approve or disapprove the commission's findings regarding zoning issues. This necessarily includes the rezoning issues described in the proposed settlement, and the proposed amendment would limit this explicit grant of power to council by essentially negating the council's authority to approve zoning changes. In addition, it violates state statute. So not only was it, of course, contradictory to the charter itself, but it violates state statute, specifically Chapter 89, which is the Zoning Enabling Act. Chapter 89 empowers the city council to establish zoning districts and regulations related thereto. Section 89060 further allows the council to modify or change zoning regulations. If certain property owners in the area that was on, there's cases that deal with this. But this means simply, this would eliminate your power to do that. That's in direct conflict with state statute. Section 89050 applies to all zoning amendments. Accordingly, the procedures for property owners to protest a council decision, they're narrowly described in Chapter 89. And there's a case, again, City of Springfield versus Goff, which strikes down people that were attempting to essentially prevent what this charter amendment seeks to prevent. And again, the court there struck it down, saying it's inconsistent with the state constitution and it's inconsistent with state statute. Section 89 deals with zoning, and the zoning powers that you have are found there as well as in your charter. And these two things must be consistent. In the second proposed amendment, again, it's an interesting approach, but the amendment itself says that any ordinance passed by council to exercise the power of eminent domain or condemnation under Section 2.13, subsection 7, or any other provision of this charter shall not take effect and shall instead be submitted to the electors of the city to approve or reject the polls. The referendum on any such eminent domain ordinance shall be conducted, provided in Article 14, except that no petition shall be required to subject any such amendment or any such eminent domain ordinance to a referendum, which shall be mandatory and automatic after the passage. So again, they're trying to do the same thing. If there is any attempt at the exercise of eminent domain as is allowed by the charter, it must go to the people. You do not have the power that you are granted by your charter, and you would not have the power that you are granted by state statute. This amendment contradicts again section 2.13 of the charter, which gives the city council, quote, the power by ordinance to exercise the power of eminent domain, a direct conflict. The proposed amendment, meanwhile, would require a vote of the people and strip the council of its authority to utilize eminent domain. The amendment also conflicts with section 2.12 of the charter in the same way as we talked about in the first section. It's limiting your powers that you are specifically granted. And there's two places where we talk about eminent domain. One is where we talk about eminent domain itself, and the other where we talk about the power of condemnation. Any place where that's referenced in the charter, this is a direct contradiction to it and inconsistent. The amendment also conflicts with section 14.2 of the charter in the same way that we talked about before. Most importantly, when it comes to the statutory conflicts, the amendment conflicts with numerous state statutes that give the city council the power of eminent domain. For example, section 88.497 through 88.844 et sequential all give the council the power to exercise eminent domain in certain circumstances without requiring or permitting a public vote. This proposed amendment would mandate the public vote anytime you attempted to exercise this very valuable power. Certain statutes even explicitly rely on the city council's discretion in setting out these powers, such as section 88.842, which states that, quote, whenever the governing body of the municipality shall deem it necessary to run any sewer through a private property, the governing body shall have the power to condemn the same. That's eminent domain, that's condemnation. You would be prohibited from exercising these necessary powers as a council if this were allowed to go forward. There's again a reference in this particular section to state XREL Hazelwood Yellow Ribbon Commission versus Clausen, and I recommend that to you because that basically stands for this proposition, where a proposed charter amendment would eliminate the council's eminent domain authority and conflicted with the state statute granting council that same power. Therefore, the proposed amendment conflicts with those statutes by subjecting the council's power of eminent domain to a public vote. I'm not opposed to public votes, but we must be opposed to those amendments which violate state statute, the Constitution, and our own charter. So the question is, once we know that these conflicts exist, and they clearly do, what do you do? Well, the answer here is that you must do nothing, because if you put this to the people, it would be on its face void. It would be on its face a vain and empty and hollow act. So my recommendation to you is that we have outlined the deficiencies, that we send a letter to the people that have proposed this that says your proposals are legally deficient and we don't intend to act on them. I'm going to ask that you do that by resolution so that we can't be a question about what we decide, what you as a council decided on tonight, or the direction that you're going to go. That is the authority that you have. There is a case called Childress versus Anderson, again, a relatively recent case where the court dismissed the petition for a writ of mandamus, which is an extraordinary writ that gets brought by individuals who are trying to compel government to act, where they believe that government has a duty to act. In that particular case, the court noted that mandamus would not force a vain or unlawful act, which is what this would be. And it said specifically, if the proposed ordinance was void for any reason, that would be a complete defense to this action. We would not impose upon the city of Springfield in this particular case the burden and expense of examining and certifying an initiative petition and submitting to its citizens for a vote an ordinance which would have no effect if adopted. These amendments would have no effect if adopted. There's absolutely no purpose in submitting these to the people for a vote because they are void on their face. That is my recommendation. I will tell you that that concurs exactly with the recommendation of Dave's. Any questions?
Neil, if we were to go against your recommendation outside legal counsel's recommendation, and this were to be put to a vote of the people and it were to pass, who has standing to challenge?
Any person who lives in the city of Webster will have standing to challenge.
At whose expense?
At their expense.
But we would have to, well, if
But
it's
we would be in
passed,
a position where arguably we might have some exposure regarding the cost of that if we enacted a statute that on its face was void.
and effectively, because it would be passed, we would have an obligation as a city to defend the constitutionality of
Well,
these.
or in this instance, which would be a very difficult thing to do since it's on its face unconstitutional.
Neil, does the notice to the petitioners include the legal reasoning for that?
It does not. It includes a general statement of why, the fact that it is deficient on its face because it's inconsistent with the law.
Why does it not include any legal reason?
You can elect to include that.
I think that might be a really good idea, is to provide that information, rather than just this very simple statement that says we're not going to consider.
Well,
this.
let's go back to the timeline. We're under no obligation to run the time. So again, in this situation where this has been filed, this charter amendment, the provision in our own charter says that you cannot bring these up I think the actual language is, it must be not less than 60 days, which means it must be 60 days or more. So the earliest that this could come to a vote is April. And again, there are cases out there that talk about how you measure these things. If we don't have a date certain in our charter for these sorts of things, then we look to state statute. And 115 of the state statutes deals with how you schedule elections. And it says, if you don't have a specific date, you can use those dates that are available in the state statute. The next municipal election would be the April election. So we're not in a time crunch. I can certainly add the information in there if you would like. I was interested in addressing this as quickly as possible. There have been spurious allegations out there that we're trying to slow this down. And we're not. We're trying to make sure that we're addressing this thing because of the magnitude and gravity of the situation.
And I think that's the precise reason to provide the legal reasoning that this is, there are legitimate concerns here. It's not simply the council doesn't want to do this.
But what is just stating that it's against statute and just the charter of the city is enough? Is it our
Sure, that's the
responsibility?
minimal, it's the minimally enough. We're not asking Neil to do any more work that he's already done.
No, I'm just saying, on the space, that response to those citizens, they probably need to go out and do their homework.
I think we should also take a larger view of this. I mean, this is now the second time we have had a referendum in the past 6-7 months. Obviously, it's becoming evident that the citizens of Webster Groves are not necessarily on board with what this council is attempting to do. So I think we need to make that a priority of figuring out what the community needs and wants and align our goals and our responsibilities with those.
What does that have to do with providing an explanation?
It doesn't. I'm just saying we need to take a wider lens view than providing an explanation as to why this is clearly unconstitutional.
I think once we
I
start
have
talking,
no preference with whether we say a one-line sentence is unconstitutional or we give them a 16-page analysis. The more important issue to me, though, is what this is signifying from the residents of Webster Groves.
I think once we enter the conversation about the development, then we can discuss that.
I think you're right. There are two issues here. There's a legal issue that we can take care of in some fashion. I favor your idea to provide more of an explanation as to why this is illegal. I think you have 800 people or so who signed this. I think it would behooves us to explain to them why this is illegal, and it does no harm to help with that. But I think David has another point here, and that is, what are the circumstances that led to this petition, and something that we need to talk about.
I'm sorry, the last part, Mary Kay?
It's what are the circumstances that led to this petition, and how do we talk about that also? But for now, tonight, we have this resolution. Do we want to table that and add to it, or do we want to continue to?
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I don't, you have a copy.
Yeah, this is the first I've seen it, and I have trouble passing a resolution that we haven't had an opportunity to spend some time with, and we only got the legal information at 4 o'clock today. So I'm happy if there's no time crunch to let this sit for the next meeting.
Can I make just one point? David, when you said why are, that's why we want to do this community engagement that we talked about 45 minutes ago, is to start enhancing communication and providing lots of ways for people to talk with us.
And I appreciate that, but the vast majority of the comments that we have received at our public hearings have been so far have been against this Douglas Air proposal. If we continue to go down this path, I think what the community is saying, stop. They're saying, let's get out of this. And this referendum is just one more example of that.
One part of it.
It could be that this referendum is just a small population making a point. And you shouldn't just look at the entire community. That's not correct. That is not correct.
And we can get into the poli-sci of this. I'm happy to do that, but I mean, what we have before us are facts, and you're asking me to assume.
Oh, yeah, and I look at the facts of the development. I look at the revenue stream. I look at the housing. I look at all those things that's going to benefit the city. And you have to make a decision based on what you see. Is it just good for the city or is it not?
So we're roaming into discussing the merits of the
Yes.
proposal at
Yes, we
this
are.
point, and then that's not what we're doing right
And
now.
we're
is it?
all, no, right now, we are going to, we have appointments to boards and commissions that we might want to deal with. We have other people who are applying for the Police Community Engagement Board. Let me see what we have that we have to deal. We
I
don't
might
have to
recommend
deal
that
with
if we
it.
could, we could maybe make one of those appointments
Yes.
and hold one for the Police Community Engagement Board, just because I think it would help the board to have.
To have
Remember,
Centron.
Centron,
Felder?
I think
I
Yeah.
agree. Let everyone agrees. Let's appoint
Absolutely.
Centron
Yes.
Felder. He comes with wonderful.
And then what are we
qualifications and
waiting
others.
for the others?
There's
There's
some more
others
applicants.
that are applying. So
Got it.
that
Okay.
will help move this things along. All right, let's take a break for 4 minutes until 1:15. We're so sorry that we've taken so long.
What about the green space? Mayor?
Oh, yes, we can quickly do the parks.
And we had some people who who wanted to be reappointed to other.
And the
commissions
parks,
too,
yes.
right?
Oh, yeah, okay, we do have Parks and Rec, we have 2 people, Michael Johnson and Sally Hilbride.
I can
Heather?
tell you that right now it's primarily women on that commission, so I think it would, just for balance sake, would be a good idea to have.
Michael
Mike
Johnson?
Is my recommendation.
Sure.
All
Okay,
right, fine, then
Good.
we will put Centron, this is the evening for the men, and Mike Johnson. And Bob Buckman, who is the current chair of the ARB, wants to be reappointed. Boy, he's a great chair.
yes, please.
Yes, we
Yeah.
will do that. And Kyle Wilson, if there are no other applicants, shall we hang on and see if there are any other applicants? It's an alternate
I've been
position.
advertising that. so-
And there haven't been?
No.
Okay.
All right.
And
All right.
The
What
green
about-
space one, Mr. Purcell.
And the green space one with Corin Purcell, we agree?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right.
Thank you, appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, and we apologize for taking so long, but hopefully you heard that this was an important discussion that we just had. So I'd like to welcome you to our city council meeting this evening, and we'll talk about the public hearing as we go along, but we'll begin tonight first with the roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Welch,
Here.
Councilmember Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss,
Here,
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
All right, we're going to begin tonight with reopening of the public hearing continued. I don't think we need to read all of that, correct, Mr. City Attorney?
We do not.
Okay, we're not going to do that. We are going to open this up for public comment, and I'm asking you because we operate with a great deal of respect here for each other. And if you have spoken at the last meeting, we're going to ask you please not to speak again and repeat yourself, because your comments are already entered into the public record. If you spoke before, but you have a new something you want to add to that, you may come up and add to that. Or if you've not spoken before, you are welcome to the 3 minutes that you are entitled to. So I'm going to go through, call your name. The first speaker is Liz James, followed by Alex Guffey.
Thank you. Is it okay if I take this off? My name is Liz James and I live at 443 Oak Street. And I'm here tonight to ask you what it is that we hope to gain from this project at this point. It doesn't appear to be city revenue, as the additional costs to the city would likely outweigh any small revenue during the 23-year TIF period. Does not appear to be affordable housing or an answer to the statistics that show we are increasingly becoming wealthier and racially more homogeneous. Webster would instantly become wealthier with 700 to 900 expensive apartments and condos relative to 53 workforce housing units, with 17 lost during the 5 to 7 years construction. And won't this likely also increase interest in development of adjacent, more affordable North Webster properties? This plan does not appear to increase sustainability, as this project would wipe out a large swath of green space, which is an essential part of the riparian corridor of Shady Creek and overall Deer Creek watershed. The gain does not appear to be regional flood control, as this project would add to the collective channelizing and engineering of urban streams, which only contributes to the overall problem of urban flash flooding, according to many local experts. TIF funding has been banned in floodplains in Missouri from the first of the year, as you know. This law was passed with bipartisan support. Why would we attempt to bypass this, especially amidst local discussions of trusting in our electeds over working around them? The gain from this project does not appear to be inclusivity, as the plan targets already thriving businesses, some multi-generational that contribute to the community and would be driven out. Claims of blight there are questionable, given not only the condition of most properties, but also the lack of open fines against them or any extensive history of citations. This plan also includes land owned by an historic 154-year-old church with deep historic cultural roots in our community history, and who were not included in the initial process of planning for this development and only learned of it in the local paper. That also leads me to believe that this was never about inclusion. I've heard the questions over and over about who we want to be as a community. I've heard the accusation that we're stagnant or letting other communities pass us by. Are we afraid of change? I'm not, and I really don't think that most are either. Do we welcome new residents and want a community where anyone can live and work? I do. Will this project accomplish any of that? It won't. It doesn't. Why has it gotten this far? Please don't approve this, just so we can say we aren't maintaining the status quo. Let's use what we've learned from this process and do better. Please don't do this.
Thank you, Liz. Alex Guffey, followed by Sarah Paradowski.
My name is Alex Guffey and I live at 425 Oak Street with my husband and 2 little kiddos. As someone that will be an immediate neighbor to this development, I've been watching this process closely with first excitement and curiosity, and then a growing sense of dread most recently. We chose our home partly because of the history and character that come with owning a home that has sheltered many generations before us. I have come to see us as stewards of our home in these places that will be here long after we are gone. This area of Webster is much the same in that the changes made here will impact us in the short term and will have ripple effects into the future. As a close neighbor, I feel the same responsibility to be thoughtful in the development of this space as I do with my own home. I actually have SG to thank for making me feel that ownership when they first reached out to hold a close neighbors input meeting at the beginning of this process. But to my dismay, very little of our feedback at that meeting was considered or seems to have been involved in the plan. So I do appreciate the opportunity to share our concerns that were dismissed in that meeting here with all of you. This space has incredible potential. However, a development here should prioritize supporting and complementing the buildings and businesses that exist in this space already today. Seizing viable businesses through eminent domain is not the solution. A development here should carefully consider the existing wildlife. Concrete culverts and removal of existing mature trees is a drastic measure that will alter the watershed and habitat of the variety of wildlife that wander from the development area through my backyard that backs to Shady Creek every day. I don't know if the deer and owls know that that area is blighted. A development here must consider the impact to daily traffic in an already overcrowded intersection that's compounded many times daily by long trains. I envy those that say they can take an alternate route. When you live across the street, that's not an option. I walk my 3-year-old to preschool many mornings over the train tracks, and that section of the walk is already a nerve-wracking experience. I can't imagine the result of adding 700 more cars onto that route. The proposed density is simply not supported by the area. My family would welcome a development that weaves small businesses, affordable housing, and accessible public spaces into that area that is within eyesight of our front porch. But this plan is clearly not that development. The opportunity cost of this proposal is too great for Webster, for our natural wildlife, and for the real neighbors of this space that will be here long after this project is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Sarah Paradowski, followed by Lindy Carroll.
Thank you for letting us make comments. I know this is extremely complicated and I'm been, as a new resident, trying to figure this all out too. I do have many objections to this potential development. I do not believe it will be beneficial overall or that it is a good avenue to increase housing equity and affordability. I don't believe that the net economic benefit is anywhere close to worthy. I do not agree that this will be an aesthetically pleasing and attractive structure that will be complementary to historical home environment of Webster Groves. I do think it is obviously far too large and dense for this space and that it will have a hugely negative impact on residents near its footprint. I live on Hillside Avenue, so I'm pretty close, not as close as Oak Street, but close enough. I don't believe that just because it's the only proposal on the table, that it's the only solution. I'm also very concerned about the ecology of Shady Creek in the area. I just do not have faith that the flood assessment done by Stock and Associates accurately represents risks, nor does it adequately address downstream and upstream potential environmental harm and flooding. In the October 5th meeting Q&A, concerns raised were skirted in the answers in several places. Stock and Associates did not really answer questions about effect on the water quality or mitigation to the impact of the stream from flooding and erosion. In regards to their answers, MSD won't remove foliage downstream, but also certainly will not remove other flood debris that might come from this development. A green space provided by the development and a manufactured stream bank, especially as the pace of revegetation will slow and density will be much less than what exists now, won't solve issues of erosion upstream that will very likely be caused by that channelization in Douglas Hill. I don't believe there's enough input and assessment from anyone besides engineers, like Stock and Associates and Army Corps of Engineers, neither of which really works, especially in the interest of ecology. Despite what the developers might say, the Corps is not known to be tough and demanding in that regard by those involved in conservation. In fact, the most recent revelations in the Corps involve increased acknowledgement of the need to incorporate more nature-based solutions to flood management. I don't think this serves that end properly, despite the assertions that the infrastructure will be an improvement on nature. 50 feet is already a very minor buffer distance that is not protective of the banks or water quality, let alone reducing that further. There are ways that development can be done incrementally and in conjunction with real conservation measures, which would lead to a much more attractive area in our city in a myriad of ways. I believe this is a huge risk for the ecological welfare of Shady Creek and for future damage potentially to the areas surrounding the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Lindy Carroll, followed by Brett Ruffcar.
Thank you, City Council and Mayor. My name is Lindy Carroll and I live at 358 Hillside Avenue. I am here tonight to express my concern about the proposed SG development project. Although I do think a redevelopment plan is a good idea for this area, I do not think the scale of the proposed plan is appropriate for Webster. The influx of residents will result in traffic issues, especially with the proximity of the train, where trains cause frequent daily backups and though has not been included in the traffic study. Also, I feel
that the additional residents will contribute to not only more of a congested neighborhood, but a much noisier neighborhood. And it'll also add more students to the Webster Grove School District and stress our city services. The proposed apartment towers will be too large and will loom heavy over the church as well as Kirkham Avenue, creating a wall separating North from South Webster. Why has there been no rendering of this vantage point from the developers? The towers will add to the impression that there is another side of the tracks. If those towers are built in Webster Groves, it'll only add to the psychological separation between the neighborhoods, walling out North Webster. 8 apartment towers will not bridge the north to the south. They will do the opposite. They will separate and they will isolate. I am right up against the natural area of this proposed site every day as I sit in my office overlooking the wooded corridor. I see all kinds of wildlife. So claims that there aren't any wildlife are simply false. This project would greatly disrupt the natural paths through for that wildlife. And once that area is gone, we will not get it back. Additionally, the natural area adds the character to the neighborhood and is a refuge for humans as well. I don't expect there will be any tax relief. I don't expect there will be any tax relief for area citizens. And if anything, this additional luxury living will only increase property values and taxes in what is now the most affordable area to own a home in Webster Groves. Any small revenue the city may expect over the next 23-year TIF period could instantly be absorbed by the need to hire additional city staff to support the influx of new residents. Webster Groves is open for business, and I am for a new development, just not this current SG plan. If this goes through at the proposed size, we will rob ourselves of the character that makes Webster a great place for commerce. Let's open the RFP again, or take an eraser to the current proposal. If it's not that easy, and if it has to be go big or go home, then I say to the SG development, go home.
Norma Ruffcar, followed by Tony Hunt. Brent Ruffcar? Who did I just speak with?
Well, you said Norma, you
Oh,
threw
Lindy.
us off a little bit, that's okay.
That's
That's okay,
Okay.
we know who we are.
Just tell us who you are.
So my name is Brett Ruffcar. I live at 625 Sherwood Drive. When we moved here 20 years ago to Webster, more than 20 years ago now, we moved here because we saw a community that had a small town feel, yet had significant diversity in many respects, especially in terms of the variety of housing that was available to prospective residents. This variety of housing provided socioeconomic diversity, which was very important to us. We had looked at a lot of other areas, Frontenac, Clayton, Ladue, Creve Coeur, Town and Country, and everything, all these different areas. Those communities did not possess the diversity of Webster. We chose Webster. Sadly, there now exists a relatively small but fervent group within Webster for whom the diversity we so cherish isn't enough. This group seems to be more interested in an ideological-based diversity, keeping with the culture wars that are so aggressively tearing our society apart. Webster was never perfect. It will never be perfect. But in the past, it has been a very welcoming area. That seems to have changed, however. I'm not on Facebook, but my wife regularly shares with me the postings on Webster Connect. I'm sure many of you have read them. And as you know, there's a small but exceedingly vocal group. They seem to be closely aligned with certain people on the city council and certain unelected leaders. Unfortunately, members of this Facebook group often post hateful and intolerant messages. It is shocking to read the vitriol and incessant condescending attacks against those who do not agree with the push for apartments, duplexes, 7-story buildings, etc. And sadly, if you do not agree, you are often called a racist, which is really terrible. This is a wonderful community, but this wonderful community is changing. Where it was so welcoming, it is now seemingly in attack mode. The motto of Webster Groves is becoming hate thy neighbor. That is sad, and that is very regrettable. As for the TIF, from what I've been able to gather, this TIF represents everything that is cited when the abusive use of TIFs are presented. The area in question is not blighted, far from it. It is an area with multiple businesses, a church, apartments, warehouses, etc. These entities, other than the church, pay taxes. If those businesses are removed from Webster, their tax dollars go away. Moreover, if the SG Collaborative has its way, it will add hundreds of apartments, which undeniably means a large number of children who will seek to attend Webster schools, but whose families as apartment dwellers will pay zero in property taxes and thus no money for Webster schools. Simple economics. And of course, a big portion, or a big point rather, of tax increment financing, the TIF, means the exceedingly wealthy developers will also effectively pay no taxes on their investment. So with all these children in Webster schools, fewer tax dollars due to the removal of tax-paying businesses for 23 years effectively, who is going to pay for the increased resources required by all these new children? The rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma Webster, followed by Tony Hunt.
First of all, I want to thank you for trying to lead us through a tumultuous time, and I'm hoping that you will keep an open ear and eyes to what your constituents are trying to share with you. Our family moved to Webster Groves about 20 years ago because I grew up in a small town and wanted our children to have a small town feel. A smaller school, smaller classrooms, and less traffic so they could ride their bike and feel safe walking. We definitely knew that we didn't want the urban feel. We wanted some place that gave you a sense of community and a place where people took ownership in their surroundings, not people moving in and out. I'm here because this new development is a mistake for Webster. It offers the current citizens nothing but additional costs. For example, a new $1 million fire truck to reach the 7th floor of the new apartment buildings. Additional traffic and the overuse of our current resources. This project will have a negative impact on our community, and here are just a few reasons why. And by the way, the information I'm sharing comes directly from the Webster Groves website. The current plan isn't reliable. We really don't know what we are getting. They have painted a picture to us that is at best fictional, showing us these pictures of wide open walk spaces, interesting retail areas, but if you read through their plan, they really don't have one. The building design will be up to the builder. For example, take a look at the current market for office space. What they have earmarked to be office, this will most surely become apartments, and we will need to accommodate 900 plus apartment units in this very small area. The collaborative is also not promising us retail space at all, but yet is giving us a spin that we will have these wonderful shops and restaurants. Larry Chapman is answering questions, but are we listening? Another concern should be parking for businesses. 2 spaces for every 3 employees, and for the supposed restaurant microbrewery, 1 parking space per 3 seats. Well, when was the last time you drove to a restaurant with 3 people in the car? And which of these employees will be walking to work? The townhomes are allowed 1 parking space per unit, but the townhomes are designed with 2 to 3 bedrooms. So tell me, where will these people park? I have 3 older children that have bought homes in Crestwood. They looked at Webster. It wasn't the cost of the home that kept them out of Webster. It was the real estate taxes. Our real estate taxes are much higher in Webster than surrounding areas. And with this additional development to support, they are guaranteed to go up. When my husband and I first heard of the idea of creating a new space, we were excited, thinking this could be a place for us to downsize. Looking at this plan is so discouraging. Many of my friends and neighbors are not against change or development, just not this monster. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Hunt, followed by Carol Hudson.
Strange being on this side. Thank you, Mayor Welsh and council members, for this opportunity to speak. My name is Tony Hunt. I live at 649 Sherwood Drive, and I'm a past member of the City Council, as you know, and I'm a current member of the Planning Commission. But I felt an obligation to speak tonight to relay my concerns regarding the proposed development, Douglas Hill development, as a resident. While on council, we as a group decided to undertake the due diligence to explore the opportunities to develop the proposed development area. The main objective of selecting this particular site was to add additional retail commercial space and to create additional housing choices as an enhancement to the old Webster Business District. Specifically, we wish to address the need for additional sales tax income and to provide housing for downsizing seniors, younger couples, singles, couples, and small families. So overall, the motivation was to revive Old Webster Business District. This proposed development, while it may address some of the stated goals, is not in keeping with our comprehensive plan or the development foundation plan. I know the development foundation plan has not been approved, but there were a lot of meetings and a lot of town hall discussions about it. And this is a plan that came out of those discussions. The development foundation plan outlines developing this area with 68 multiple family housing units and approximately 130,000 square feet of retail and office. The proposed development with over 700 multifamily units and over 100,000 square foot of retail, office, and restaurant uses instead could potentially overtake and overwhelm the existing historic district. There's no transition in height or setback between the adjacent single-family residential neighborhoods or any obvious connection with the existing business district. This new town-style development in many ways ignores the old Webster, which it seeks to recreate. So no doubt this is an extremely difficult and expensive site to develop. It has steep grades, environmental issues, infrastructure challenges, and more. There is a reason this area has been underutilized for so long, but I do believe there's a right mix of retail, office, and mixture of multifamily that can be developed at this site. I'm also very concerned that the lure of workforce housing should not be used as a carrot for approval of this project. I'm in agreement that affordable housing options in the city is very much needed and opportunities should be very much considered. However, I'm not convinced that maybe 50 or 60 affordable units out of 700 plus is worth the cost of losing our historic downtown identity. There are other ways we as a community can look at to provide affordable housing options, perhaps by working with developers at single-family homes and maybe promoting diversity by providing incentives to minority businesses to locate in a community that we all might want to work and live in. It was shared at the Business Development Commission that there are a couple of sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Carol Hudson, followed by Carol Truesdale.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'll refer only lightly to notes. My name is Carol Hodson. My 19-year-old daughter and I live at 422 Oak Street, just 3 houses down from the area that we're discussing. And I have been watching from my house. Every one of these people in here attend these meetings, sit on Zoom, debate, strategize, and seek to be heard and seen in what I see as very sincere, desperate almost quest to be recognized as members of a beautiful community who want the best for their children and their families and for all of us. And I haven't weighed in. And I'm here tonight because I'd like to. We're coming out of a pandemic that has been threatening our psychological and physical health for 2 or 3 years. We all want us to thrive and be healthy and survive. But there's a proposal on the table that right now that is so unhealthy in so many ways. I could speak to the specifics of being 3 houses down from the train tracks and all the cars that have not been counted because the survey was done during COVID, or they can't figure out the template for the train crossing. I could talk about the fact that I can go to bed and hear the owls in my community singing to each other, and they'll be gone, as will the wild turkeys, as will the range of birds, the flora and fauna. In fact, the gardens of any area surrounding that development will be dramatically affected, and we're a garden community. But where we've had sun, we'll have shade. Where we've had shade, we've had sun. But mostly I want to say, I see no fiscal benefits. I see no psychological benefits. I not only do not see a coming together of the community, but I have witnessed, and I'm standing here now saying that you talked about revive, that word came up, but all I see is divide. We're talking about gain or possible credit or fiscal improvement, and all I hear is anger and frustration and nitpicking, and it's not where I moved to, and it's not where I want to raise my daughter. More often than not, proposals like this are viewed quantitatively, and the logic and the percentages are what make the difference in swaying the final. And I'm here to speak to the human element at stake. This proposal not only checks no in almost every category, including kickback to our community, but it checks no real violently and boldly against the mental health of our community. Please don't pass this.
Thank you, Carol. Carol Truesdale, followed by AJ Angergala.
Hello, thank you for having us tonight to hear some more public comments. I'm speaking from notes as well. First, I should say my name's Carol Truesdale. I live at 14 Cheyenne Court. I'm in Glendale, but I travel often down Kirkham. I'm sad every time I drive by the site thinking what it might become. And I think people have already gone through all the possible traffic nightmares. The traffic backs up several times a day. It's horrible, waiting for the trains. The floodplain issue, even if the TIF is passed or approved, the flooding will remain, and it's a big issue. You take out all those mature trees, it's going to be worse than it is now. What I'm most concerned about is the character and the scale of this proposed project. I think of the homes right across Kirkham. They're very modest sized. Can you imagine if you lived in one of those homes and you're looking out your kitchen window or your bedroom window every day and looking at these 7-story buildings looming over you? And even if you took some of the bigger homes off Elm or Lockwood and put them there, or any of the McMansions that are being built, they would also pale in comparison to how tall these buildings will be. It's just not, it wouldn't be a nice place to live, to look out and see that every day or walk by it every day. And my biggest, another big concern is the Old Community Baptist Church. They're right, there. Think of them on Sunday at their services, looking out their windows. What about the sanctity of their congregation and their service? And they've got this big looming development staring over them or looming over them. And I just think out of respect for the church, if nothing else, this project should not go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. AJ, followed by Andrew Ye.
Hello. Thank the council members in the city for recognizing, giving the opportunity to speak. My wife and I, Elizabeth, are here I'm going to speak tonight as residents of West Kirkham Avenue, immediate neighbors and potential victims to this proposal. I would like to reiterate and emphasize how displeased the overwhelming majority of the community is about this massive development. Over 820 residents, like David Franklin brought up in the previous segment, have signed the petition opposing the overall project or the scale of it for environmental concerns or for moral convictions in reference to using eminent domain, et cetera. My wife and I moved to Webster Groves because it's a picturesque, quiet neighborhood. That's what we signed up for. We didn't sign up for being surrounded by 8 towering buildings, 3,000 people being added to one block, or hundreds of cars getting dumped on our street. That's not what we signed up for, or living through a multi-year construction project. However, we've been patient because the communal good has to be greater than our personal loss. We were okay with that. If any of the developers are willing to swap houses with us, we'd be happy, we would be glad to accept that. We oppose the variance to the Shady Creek, like a lot of people said, like the TIF funding for private acquisitions and using eminent domain to forcibly move property owners who are not wanting to move. We oppose all of that. And small businesses, we love them in our community. The collateral damage from this project outweighs the communal benefit. And instead of developer proposing a massive project based on what financial models work for them and what profit margins work for them, what I'm suggesting is, and what I'm urging the city council and the members to do is, come up with a proposal that works for the community, right? We spent a lot of time over the last almost year and a half with a lot of ideas, a lot of input, communal feedback. So take that and look at a project that fits the neighborhood, serves the purpose, enhances the existing businesses, and based on the collective feedback. Forcing the project against the will of the community will be met with fierce opposition. Thank you.
Andrew, ye or yay?
Ye.
Ye, and Michael Chakudian, if you spoke at the last meeting, if you have something additional to add, we'll let you do that.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time. I was asked to speak by a lot of friends tonight. I've been very quiet about everything and not sure where I should lead or speak up about it because I am a developer. I'm a real estate investor. I live in Webster. I've been here for 12 years. My wife's family has been here for over 30 years. I love Webster. I love the feel of it. I want it to retain the same values that it has. My late wife actually served on the planning commission for several years before she passed. So, but what I feel about development is that it has to go with the community. It has to work in conjunction with the community. You have to please the neighbors. The fact that you can talk about not going to what the neighborhood can agree with, it just doesn't work. I mean, the city council has obviously heard plenty of times that it's not working. Plenty of petitions have wasted a lot of time of the city's resources. We should not pass this. There is a right way to develop property. I've developed property with my family for the past 20 years without TIF money. If it's so good, sometimes, yes, you need TIF money, but why? If you can do it on your own, it's so good, you can do it on your own. You don't need the TIF money to make this project happen. The project has issues with the sizes of homes. I've heard that, okay, well, there's 4 buildings of on each street. Okay, well, yes, it's gonna tower all these streets on Kirkham. I live on 639 Kirkham. I had bought another house on 16 Hamel just to develop. I'm for development, not to this scale. It really just, another architect friend of mine brought up the fact, maybe do a sun study. What is it gonna do to block out the sun, the southern exposure from all those folks on Kirkham? I thought, well, a sun study, that seems silly, but it actually makes sense because the sunshine, seeing it every day is a joy and is a gift to see every day. So maybe that's one of the things. You know, everybody's already talked about the traffic. I understand traffic as well. I hate sitting behind the trains. A lot of my friends didn't arrive on time in order to get here because of the trains. Yes, it is an issue, but you know, it's gonna get worse. If there are to do this project, there are certain parameters that have to be met in order to please the community and work with the council, with the government, with the neighbors. There is a happy medium to it. Maybe there's not a win-win, but I hope there is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Mr. Chakudian, if you have a minute that you have something you want to add to what you said at the last meeting, you may do so. You're done. I'm sorry, but we're going to move on. The next card is Larry Chapman.
Is this the last public comment then?
Yes.
Should we, I'm happy for you to speak, Larry. I was just wondering if we should just close the public hearing then and move on and let Larry talk and we can ask questions.
Well, let's go ahead and let him speak with his
And we also
speaker.
will need to check any raised hands.
Yes, and we will.
So, you know, it's kind of interesting how people really started attacking me over this thing. You know, we were invited here by the city to respond to RFPs. We were the only one that responded actually the way the RFP was written. Of the 20 other developers that were approached, only one submitted something that was not anywhere near what it was. It was just a single apartment building plopped down like every other apartment building in West County. And we've tried very, very hard to do what the city's asked, but we've run up against some problems of feasibility. And that's just what it is. You know, we have the support of the Chamber of Commerce. We have the support of the old Webster Business District because they believe it's going to be good for them. We just do. And so there are a lot of people who do support this. I understand the immediate neighbors are nervous. You know, when I look at things like this, I worry about how people will perceive it. And then I think about places like the Riverwalk in San Antonio, where all the buildings are 7, 8 stories right next to that. Well, hey, just.
Hey,
it
whoa.
doesn't mean tall is not necessarily bad in terms of the TIF. It protects.
Let Mr. Chapman speak.
You really are going to be that.
And
rude
Mr.
all
Chapman, please address to the
all right,
council.
I just,
Thank
you know, I mean, this has got a little out of hand. You know, we have engaged more professionals than I can count. I understand there's trains and traffic. If we knew exactly when the trains were coming, the traffic engineer could do a better job. I've encouraged people to hire another traffic engineer that would come up with a different result than our traffic engineer did. They haven't done that. As far as flooding, we have a civil engineer put a seal on it. It's been approved by MSD. We've had other civil engineers look at it. We've not seen a single civil engineer, professional, that would put their seal on it and say professionally that what we're telling you is wrong, because it's not. It's correct. The flooding will get better, not worse. You know, it's everybody has lots of good opinions, and all those opinions are fine, but they're opinions. They're not facts. We've had every bit of our financial analysis reviewed by a third-party financial consultant. I mean, we're doing all we can to try and do a good job. And I believe when we're done, not only will it be a benefit to the community, it'll fold right into the fabric and people will point to it as a really great thing to do. In terms of financing, you know, TIF is a tool that can be used to help cities, municipalities leverage developers' money instead of their own. The city can always elect to do it on their own and spend their money. Part of what we patterned this after was in Dublin, Ohio, where the city did all the infrastructure on their own and then brought the developers in. Then they can set all the rules they want. But until then, it simply has to be financially feasible, because if you can't finance it, you can't build it. And if your goal is just to kill it, that's fine. My one last thought is, if we can't find somehow a way to grow the population of Webster Groves, the same 23,000 people will just keep paying for services that go up over time. And so eventually only the wealthy can live here. I think that's true. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. No, sorry, we're going to move on. And do we have any hands up?
Mary Color, and those on Zoom, you just have to unmute yourself. Don't worry about your camera.
So first is Mary Color. Mary, if you can unmute yourself and give us your name and your address.
Yes, thank you. My name is Mary Color. I serve as the Director of Stream Teams United. We are the Missouri Stream Team Watershed Coalition. My residence is 1923 Shelby 149 in Shelbyville, Missouri. I work to promote stream conservation across the entire state of Missouri. The Missouri Stream Team Watershed Coalition is a nonprofit, nonpartisan coalition of Missouri Stream Team associations located throughout the state of Missouri, with 8 of our member associations located in the greater St. Louis area. Missouri Stream Teams are individuals who care about our state's river and stream resources and volunteer to improve the quality of streams for the benefit of both the aquatic environment and people in the adjacent and downstream communities. Our organization has concern over the proposed development and plans that would disrupt the Shady Creek stream channel, riparian corridor, and create development within the creek's floodplain. Specifically, disturbance of the stream channel by modifying the natural channel, concreting or channelizing the stream is disruptive to the native stream ecosystem and is not beneficial to the aquatic integrity of the stream. A vegetated riparian buffer of at least 50 feet is critical for maintaining health of the stream's water quality and aquatic ecosystem. Buffers of this size for this size of stream filter pollutants from runoff, slow stormwater, and help reduce downstream flooding. Finally, development should not occur within a known floodplain. Our state precipitation data is showing that our state is receiving more frequent and more intense rainfalls. Floodplains are the natural areas where rivers and streams can flow out of their banks during high rainfall events, where water is allowed to spread out and dissipate energy, allowing the velocity of water to slow down and therefore reducing damage from flooding to downstream areas. Intense rainfall events and flooding of communities in the Midwest are becoming more commonplace. The result of stream channel disruption, removal of riparian corridors, and development in floodplains is not only destructive of these important habitats, but also increases flood intensity and flood risk for downstream and adjacent properties. Progressive communities in the Midwest are realizing the flaws of development within floodplains and are taking measures to give the needed room to our rivers and streams so that future floods will have less destruction on their communities. Also, some communities are now trying to restore stream channels that have been previously damaged by actions that encroach upon and alter the natural stream channel. The City of Webster Groves should be commended for having in place stream buffer protection regulations, sections 83.010 through 83.070 for the Code of Webster Groves, which explain all the benefits to people in the environment provided by these regulations. The city should ensure that the stream buffer protection regulations established are followed for the protection of Shady Creek and for the benefit of people downstream. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary. We have a hands up from a David. David, you'll need to give us your name and address.
Yep, my name is Dave Lawver, 201 Isfield Drive. Before voting on the current rezoning request, I strongly request that all council members consider their precedent a yes vote will set for future development. The current rezoning request ignores many of the height and setback requirements that exist in our current city code. Approving 7-story buildings and/or this density of buildings, especially this close to residential housing, could open a floodgate for this type of development. If you approve this, what is there to stop the next developer from tearing down the buildings at Big Bend and Elm and constructing 7-story mixed-use buildings? Or from doing it where the old Subaru dealership is, or somewhere else in Wood Orchard? On what grounds will the city be able to say no to future requests that are similar to this proposal? We are not an island. We are one of 88 municipalities in St. Louis County. We are only approximately 2.4% of the population of St. Louis County, less than 1% of the metro region. Webster is only slightly more than 1% of the total area of St. Louis County. Webster Groves currently has a wide variety of housing options, both in type and cost. Adding more cookie cutter apartment buildings does nothing for our community. It is redundant and unnecessary, and subsidized developments like this are partially to blame for the inability of the metro region to grow. I hope each and every one of you is asking yourself, why would you approve this zoning change in its current form? Even if the tax projections are spot on and magically all the residents of the new development are transfers from New York, but only move so they can move into these new luxury apartments, so it truly is all new revenue and not just shifting sales from other Webster businesses, the projected tax revenue isn't worth the destruction to the natural environment nor the nearby residents and business owners' lives. The quote-unquote affordable housing argument is just a red herring. There are more than 1,200 apartments in the immediate area that are more affordable than what these so-called affordable apartments will be. I am not opposed to rezoning of this area in general, but I'm absolutely against the rezoning proposal in the current form. I request that this area be treated like any other commercial area in regards to height of buildings above grade and setbacks, including stream buffer. I'm also requesting that no sales tax tip be offered as it is a net loss for the region. I don't believe that eminent domain to steal private property and give it to another private citizen is the right thing to do. I also ask that if property tax tip is used, that it's limited no more than 10 years and then gradually decreased so that babies born this year won't have to wait until they have kids of their own before a school district sees any real revenue from redevelopment. The rezoning and proposed redevelopment are way out of character for this area. And instead of cleaning up the allegedly blighted area, it may just become a new type of blight that we'll all have to live with for long after it is built. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So Katie and Eric, do we see any more hands up? No. So I get to see if there's anybody else in the public who wishes to speak. All right, then I'm going to turn this over to council to see if you have any questions, comments, or desire to close this public hearing.
Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, you have, if we're going, I guess we need to take a vote on closing the public hearing.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes, all right. And so you get to enter.
Our exhibit list, which will be printed and is online and will be part of the record, is as follows. This will include the Plan Commission staff report by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development, and Danny Gendusa, planner for meeting date June 7th of 2021, with the following attachments. Number 1, written statement from SG Collaborative. Number 2, Exhibit A, owners list. Number 3, Exhibit B, proposed uses. Number 4, Exhibit C, existing boundary survey, existing conditions and demolition plan, and conceptual site plan prepared by Stock and Associates, dated 3/31 of 21. Number 5, Exhibit D, cross-section through the site prepared by Cedar Green. Number 6, Exhibit E, renderings, imagery examples, and photos of the development model. Number 7, Exhibit F, structured parking layout drawings. Number 8, Exhibit G, traffic impact study prepared by T2 Traffic and Transportation, dated 4/1 of 2021. Number 9, Exhibit H, road circulation drawing. Number 10, Exhibit I, tree stand delineation plan and tree preservation plan prepared by Loomis and Associates, dated 4/2 of 21. Number 11, Exhibit J, flood study narrative prepared by Stock and Associates with appendix drawings dated 3/17 of 21. Number 12, spreadsheets of rezoning feedback received through May 28th of 2021, 11 a.m. with attachments. Also including the Plan Commission staff report by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Zoning, along with Danny Gendusa, planner for meeting, date July 12, 2021, with the following attachments. Number 1, written statement from SG Collaborative LLC. Number 2, Exhibit A, owner list. Number 3, Exhibit B, proposed uses. Number 4, Exhibit C, existing boundary survey, existing conditions and demolition plan and conceptual site plan prepared by Stock and Associates, dated 3/31 of 2021. Number 5, Exhibit D, cross-section through the site prepared by Cedar Green. Exhibit F, renderings, imagery examples, and photos of the development model. Number 7, Exhibit F, structured parking layout drawings. Number 8, Exhibit G, traffic impact study prepared by T2 Traffic and Transportation, dated 4/1/2021. Number 9, Exhibit H, road circulation drawing. Number 10, Exhibit I, tree stand delineation plan and tree preservation plan prepared by Loomis and Associates, dated 4/2 of 21. Number 11, Exhibit J, flood study narrative prepared by Stock and Associates with appendix drawings, dated 3/17/21. Number 12, spreadsheet of rezoning feedback received through July 6th, 2021, 11 a.m. Plan that will also include the Plan Commission staff report prepared by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Zoning, and Danny Gendusa, planner, for meeting date August 9th, 2021, with the following attachments. Number 1, a draft ordinance recommendation dated August 9th, 2021. Number 2, comments from SG Collaborative received on August 2nd, 2021. Number 3, memorandum dated July 30th, 2021 from T2 Traffic and Transportation. Number 4, spreadsheet of rezoning feedback received through August 2nd, 2021, 11 a.m. Also including a Plan Commission report prepared by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development, and Danny Gendusa, planner, for meeting date September 13th, 2021, with the following attachments. Number 1, draft ordinance recommendations dated September 13th, 2021. Number 2, draft exhibits A, site coverage, and B, height and street section. Number 3, Shady Creek flood study executive summary dated 8/19/21. Full flood studies available on the city website. Number 4, spreadsheet of rezoning feedback received through September 7th, 2021 at 11 a.m. Number 5, letter from Sustainability Commission dated 8/30 of 21, which was not read into the record on 8/31/21. Number 6, letters and emails that were sent directly to the city council from remarks of visitors that were about the rezoning, dated from 4/20 of 21 through 8/22 of 21. Also including a PowerPoint presentation before the Plan Commission from June 7th, 2021, July 12th, 2021, August 9th, 2021, August 31st, 2021, and September 13th, 2021 Plan Commission hearings. Minutes of the June 7th, 21, July 12th, 21, August 9th, 21, August 31st, 21, and September 13th, 21 Plan Commission meetings. Written comments submitted to the Plan Commission between June 7th, 2021 and September 13th, 2021, totaling 178 instances. Written comments submitted to the City Council between September 12th, 2021 and September 2nd, 2021, 5 p.m., totaling 108 instances. Director of Planning and Development's PowerPoint before the City Council, and finally, the zoning code of the City of Webster Groves.
Thank you for that extensive list. And with that, the public hearing is closed and we can move on to Bill 9166. Councilwoman Richardson, could you call for the first and second reading?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9166.
Second.
Bill 9166.
Yes.
Douglas Hill, an application by SG Collaborative LLC for a change of zoning from it. Am I reading the wrong one?
That's 9166.
9166, an ordinance.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you. I got it. I was on the wrong page.
Okay.
Thank you. An ordinance amending chapter 53 of the zoning code by changing the zoning from A4 7,500 square foot residence district, B1 multiple family district, E industrial district, and PC planned commercial district to PC planned commercial district at the following addresses: 55 Lincoln Avenue, 62 Lincoln Avenue, 49 North Gore Avenue, 51 North Gore Avenue, 61 North Gore Avenue, 65 North Gore Avenue, 69 North Gore Avenue, 79 North Gore Avenue, 40 North Rock Hill Road, 200 Sherman Place, 201 Sherman Place, 203 Sherman Place, 205 Sherman Place, 207 Sherman Place, 200 West Kirkham, 204 West Kirkham, 234 West Kirkham, 240 West Kirkham, 242 West Kirkham, 320 West Kirkham, 340 West Kirkham, 107 West Pacific, 109 West Pacific, 111 West Pacific, 115 West Pacific, 125 West Pacific, 147 West Pacific, 207 West Pacific, 209 West Pacific, 211 West Pacific, 227 West Pacific, 315 West Pacific, 325 West Pacific, 341 West Pacific, on an approximately 15.1 acre tract of land, and repealing ordinances 3835, 3900, 6467, 7320, 7369, 7424, and 7519, and matters related thereto.
All right, if the council has any questions, comments, anything that they'd like to ask, talk about at this point before we do the second reading?
I have a question. And I will totally acknowledge my ignorance. But I've asked a similar question before, and I don't know if this is the appropriate, but if we can make, I've asked before, why is it that we have not been able to make zoning changes that would have allowed residents or owners or current businesses in that area to do other type of development other than the zoning that's there that I understand restricts their ability to do improvements? If we can do this, why can't we do that?
Well, that's probably a good question for Mara to answer. What is it? Because we are getting that question. Can you explain what is it that is keeping the current owners there from adding to their businesses, investing in their businesses, et cetera?
So I don't know if that was exactly, I didn't hear that as Karen's question.
Yeah, my question is, if we can make these types of zoning changes that are in this bill number 9166, why is it that we cannot make the type of zoning changes in that area that will allow individual developers or businesses or existing businesses to redevelop and do things to improve that area? Now, I mean, if we can change the zoning, why can we not change the zoning in a way that allows for development from the current business owners or residents? Or
So in order to do a change of zoning, you either need to have an applicant that has applied for that request for change of zoning. Or when you are moving forward with the change of zoning, you, if you're doing a planned commercial district, for example, you have to have someone produce a plan, and that plan gets put in place. Back in the 1980s, when they put in place the PC zoning that's in the far corner of the property, they put it in place with someone will come in and provide that plan. So when that zoning was put in place, it left everyone in that area in a limbo. They can continue to operate. They can continue to operate those businesses that are there. They can renovate the interiors of their businesses. They can't expand physically the footprint of those businesses because no plan ever came in at that time in order to provide a list of what someone would use or what they would request for that area. The rest of that development area has its own zoning, and over the years, people came in and applied for rezonings to make changes. So for example, the condos on the corner, someone purchased that property, someone rezoned that property, they came in with a plan of how they were going to build, and they developed a series of condominiums on that corner. So as different people have come in and have requested changes of zoning, there's elements that they've been able to do. Some of those zoning categories allow a more expansive use. Some of the zoning that's industrial allows for things that might not be allowed in other areas. And many people did not want to change that zoning because it would then restrict some of the things that they could currently have on the property. So I don't know if that completely answers your question.
So I think you're saying it's possible to rezone this, but you just need an applicant.
But well, you need an applicant, which is, we have an applicant at this point, and that is our applicant came in with a plan and we moved forward with a rezoning based on that plan. If someone comes in with a plan, there are, again, there's a differentiation between
There's not one zoning district that's going to allow everyone that's in there right now to operate as they're operating. There's just not. There's such a mix of uses that are in there, and there's currently multiple zoning districts in there. There's industrial, there's some multifamily, there's a single family residential, there's, you know, there's so many different things that are in there. There is not going to be a particular category that a city could just rezone everything and allow everything to continue as it is today.
But it sounds like the biggest hindrance on current property owners is the PC that remains in place.
Yeah. But that's only on a small corner. That does
Okay.
not cover, there are many other businesses there that are not in that PC. So that PC does not go past Lincoln. It doesn't go past Sherman. It doesn't, it's only that very, very tiny corner in that one.
That's the southeast corner.
Only the southeast corner.
And it goes the whole way to Lincoln?
It goes to, so it covers the vacant piece and then one of the warehouse buildings. So it only goes part way. It doesn't cover the other side of Lincoln. The other side that has Webster Window and Door and the school district, that's zoned industrial. That is not zoned PC.
How far north does the PC zoning go?
It only goes to the cell tower.
Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, it goes to the cell tower and then it takes a jog and continues a little bit farther north on the other side.
I mean, we could get rid of zoning in this tract of land, right? And test out the theory of no zoning. I mean, because that's effectively,
I'm saying.
yeah, I mean, that's effectively what, I mean, let's get rid of zoning in this area and let's see what happens.
I mean, what do we do to create some options, you know, because what I do see with this is that what appears to be the current situation is that we can't do anything because of the way it's zoned. Well, then let's change the way it's zoned so that we have more options. Because it looks like the only way we can change it is if, right now in my mind, I'm seeing the only way we can change it is if we do this. Well, that makes no sense to me.
So if someone wants to come forward with a plan, or the owners of the property want to come forward with plans of what they would like to do, that gives that opportunity that they can rezone their own property. And that area is designated as mixed use. So it gives a lot of flexibility that if someone wants to come forward with a potential rezoning, they could move forward.
Is it possible for that area to be zoned mixed use? And I'm sorry, I don't know, I'm asking a question.
Mixed use is PC planned commercial. So that is what the attempt is right now, is to zone it to a PC planned commercial, which allows for mixed use, which allows for a series of uses that can be selected from either the C or D commercial, which also includes residential.
Can the council initiate a zoning change?
I think that's a legal question that would probably need to be asked and researched. It appears that in the 80s, that was what occurred. But because there was no plan put forth, because they didn't spend the money to create a plan to explore what could happen there, they were hoping that someone would come in with that plan after the fact. That is what has left us with that odd PC in that far corner.
But your charter, of course, requires that you go through planning and zoning. So the odd part would be, how does council approach planning and zoning to make a recommendation to council to change the zoning laws? Except the charter mandates it.
Okay, we just submit it to them, they give it back to us, and just a pro forma thing, right?
Well, I mean, again, if you want to call it that.
Mara, I had a question sorry, Karen.
That's okay, no, go ahead, because thank you. Thank you, Maura.
In regards to, say we approve this moving forward, how, since it's a planned community, can you explain how the design of the buildings would work, the architectural renderings, and the final result? Because right now we just have pretty much the idea of 7 buildings, but not what they're going to look like. So can you explain and how the community would have input on that?
So once the rezoning is put in place, it creates a ordinance of additional regulations that would be similar than if someone was going straight through what's in our zoning ordinance. So those additional regulations would require that within 12 months, a final development plan comes before the Plan Commission. It does come before the Plan Commission without a public hearing. If it meets everything that's in the ordinance, it can move forward with a plan of how it's going to be developed. So that plan is a site plan essentially that shows the footprints of all the buildings, much more specifically how the transportation system is going to work. It goes through and has the approval of a floodplain development plan. It would require a whole series of the different approvals that have been listed in that report. And it gets reviewed by all of our various departments, fire department, my department through reviewing against building codes and building permits. All of those things get reviewed. So this is reviewed as a final development plan. Then each phase would come in with a specific site development plan. So we would review each element as it comes forward again to ensure that it meets all of the regulations in the code and meets the building code. That would get more specific than just the footprints of the building and the overall infrastructure. Then as that moves forward, as each plan comes in for a site development plan, it goes before the Architectural Review Board. Each individual building would be reviewed by the Architectural Review Board for approval. Once it's been approved with a site development plan with the Architectural Review Board review, it will come in for full permit review. That's when we receive land disturbance permits. We look at electrical, we look at plumbing, we look at fire suppression systems, we look at all the details, and then construction can start from that point. And then that would happen each section or phase. And it's similar to other in the county. They also have a PC planned commercial for multi-phase developments. It's a very similar process.
Can the initial submission to the Plan Commission versus what is before us in Bill number 9166, what changes were made?
So changes are not supposed to be made. What you're supposed to do is come in with an idea of what you would like to build. Using that as a format or a framework, we develop a series of the regulations, which are reviewed by the Plan Commission. And that is moved forward as a recommendation to the council. Once you make that recommendation and agree to what all those regulations are, that's why they have to come back with a final development plan. So essentially the process is they bring in what's called a preliminary development plan. You are only approving the regulations and the preliminary, using the preliminary development plan. And whatever regulations you put in place, when they come back with the final development plan, if they're showing something in preliminary and you've changed what the regulations are going to be, that final development plan has to show that. So for example, there was some conversation about a particular setback of a building. We didn't require them to come back and amend every time we started thinking about what those regulations might be. We put in some setbacks. What those setbacks are or what they are established through the ordinance will be what they have to come back with.
And this might be a Neil question, but are we prohibited from making amendments to what was brought up to us from the Plan Commission?
You're not prohibited from making amendments, but we always recommend that if you make an amendment, that you need to give staff time to review whether that amendment is going to cause some other issue to occur within the ordinance. So for example, which you'll be seeing this in the next few months or so, we're working on the tree ordinance. And my understanding is that when the tree ordinance went to city council a number of years ago, there was a last minute change to a particular number. And that number has caused problems over the last decade or so because it conflicts with another number in the code. So ensuring that if you did want to make some changes, that you would need to give us some time to ensure that there aren't conflicts with what we are proposing or conflicts that could cause issues with other ordinances.
And my question is probably more fundamental. What if I wanted to propose an amendment from taking these buildings from 7 stories down to 3 stories? Is that prohibited?
Go ahead, Mark.
I don't necessarily have an answer for that. I mean, what the request is if there's a reason behind why you are removing it to that height. We always try to provide the reasoning behind why a particular element can't be met. And I always think of this as it's a series of puzzle pieces. It's a 3D puzzle. So once you say a certain thing can't be met, when we review something and we say it can't be met because parking can't be met, or setbacks can't be met, or this item can't be met, just arbitrarily saying I'm not going to do a certain element, there's important elements that you need to provide to understand why you're saying that that particular thing should not be met, because it is a PC planned commercial. There are not restrictions in our ordinances that require a particular height or a particular density or a particular set of elements. It is a planned district. And again, it's very similar to other planned districts in the county and across the country.
So what I am surmising, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is in terms of procedure or process, if I want only 5-story buildings and I really can't, I just think 7 is too dense, rather than change the ordinance, I'd vote against the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood.
And
I mean,
part of the reason is if you were to make a decision that simply said, I'm going to reduce it down to 3, you haven't had a public hearing on that. You haven't heard voices on that. And one of the things that we're supposed to do on each of these elements, particularly something as significant as that, is have the public hearing. Secondly, I would say that that's the quick trip case. If you simply picked a number, why not 4? Why not 5? Why not 1? That it's an arbitrary decision, and you haven't given anyone an opportunity to be heard on that. But again, if it is as simple as it's what I would prefer, then you run directly into quick trip.
I'm interested in the public space that is proposed. Will that be public land or would that be privately owned?
So that is something that would come with the development agreement and not with the rezoning.
And see, this is where I struggle, right? Because the development agreement is obviously a very important facet of this. But to me, it's like I'm voting on the whole planned commercial, the whole planned community. And if I don't know these fundamental things on such an alleged transformative proposal, how can I make an educated and informed decision?
So a zoning ordinance is supposed to establish physical square footages, locations, heights, setbacks. It doesn't designate whether something is privately owned or publicly owned. So it's establishing the element of you are requiring a certain amount of open space. You're requiring a certain amount or square footage of building in relationship to infrastructure. You are requiring those elements, but who owns it? That should not be put into a zoning ordinance.
And that's true for the street itself too?
Yes. So typically that gets established as a, what we've required in the ordinances, they do have to plat that. And in platting that plat goes before the city council. So the platting of it will establish the roadway. It will establish right-of-way. It will establish easements, all of those elements. And that's an element that was put as a requirement in the zoning ordinance as it's drafted.
I mean, in a world where this wasn't in a flood zone, we could be able to do this contemporaneously, do the development plan and also, vote on the development plan and the zoning at the same time. But because of the new state statute, we're under a time crunch. So we really can't do what, in your experience, Mara, I guess what I'm asking is, does the development plan and the zoning come contemporaneously usually in a planned commercial like this when there's a TIF?
Each project is so different. So I can't give, I've worked on a number of them, but they've all been, every single one has been different. Many have had floodplain issues, some have had TIF issues, others have had other elements. So they're all very different from one another. So each one has its own intricacies.
So is Mark on the call? Is Mark Grimm on?
No, I don't believe so, but I do, to this point, because Mark Grimm and I, Mr. Franklin had a TIF member ask that question. So the zoning and development, obviously, development agreements, as Mara said, have happened at different times, some with zoning, some with not. The only thing in the timeline that has a deadline is if the council wishes to have TIF. So you can, if the council decides, you can move votes out on zoning and development agreement contemporaneously and such. TIF can happen and wait, meaning that the vote has happened. positively, obviously, if this is going to go forward, but sit there and wait for those other elements to be passed.
That's, so you're saying that the only vote that we are under a time crunch to do is the TIF. The other two could occur whenever.
In terms of a statutory deadline or such like that. Obviously, if Mr. Chapman want to create the project, I mean, that's a different timeline, but in terms of statutory requirement.
But, you know, this is the developer's own statement that this is going to be a big project, you know, go big or go home. It's transformative in the aspect of what it's bringing to Webster Groves. And it seems to me difficult to vote on a zoning and or TIF without having the development agreement to back it up. You know, it seems to me like, why would I vote yes on something where I'm going to guess what the negotiations are going to be? That's what I'm struggling with.
I'm going to start over here. and
Okay,
I'm gonna-
I would like to say a couple things. If you reduce the height, there are some, it's a geometry problem. If we reduce the height, then we need to increase the surface area or the footprint, which is we're limited to only 30% of the site to be covered with buildings. It does not count other impervious surfaces.
So that was a limitation we put on it. It's
Okay.
not necessarily the limitation. So if you were to reduce height, again, puzzle piece, you'd have to increase the impervious surface, or you would have to increase, decrease the setbacks. Again, there are those
Right,
pieces.
so it's not just there, it's a math problem. And then second, I think we talked about this last week and maybe we weren't at a conclusion, but as I understood it, we wanted the zoning and the redevelopment agreement to be on a parallel path moving forward so that we would have a development agreement underway at the time that we vote on the zoning. Is that not where we landed last time?
It could be, I'm,
It was.
That was my understanding.
That was my understanding.
so we would postpone any votes on this
The third
structure
reading would wait.
until we
get
have
going
a
on the-
a redevelopment agreement.
And in the
At least a
redevelopment
process.
agreement, we can, in the redevelopment agreement, we can cover the percentage of workforce housing. We can cover perhaps where the $1 million fire truck comes from. We can cover some of these other items that come up as questions in the public hearing. We can address those in the redevelopment agreement and come to an agreement between the city and SG Collaborative. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam.
Okay.
But the financing aspect of it, we have to get done.
Yes, that's separate. Yes,
It's separate, but I think it's separate in the.
separate
aspect that it's a-
timeline.
But it's a separate than a vote, yeah. But I think that it's part and parcel to the whole thing.
And we're trying to coordinate that right now.
So I guess what I'm asking is, are we gonna have a development agreement before I vote, this council votes on either a TIF or a zoning?
Well, not TIF, because you won't get both.
And
I think to clarify, you would have many conversations. We intend to begin with you conversations with council at the next meeting regarding the development agreement, including the staff drafts from the perspectives we have heard. So you will have seen many of our things, which we have talked about as staff and as council ahead of those votes. The timing of how quickly the deal comes together, that's really a conversation between the council and the developer in that regard.
But remember, David, TIF doesn't come into being if you don't have everything else. So you can vote to do the TIF or set up the project for the TIF. If you don't come to a redevelopment agreement and vote and approve that, or come to zoning and vote and approve that, it doesn't happen anyway. So again, the TIF itself, other than the timing that's placed on us by the change in the statute, you can do that and set that aside and then address these other issues.
I would only add that, I think as much as I agree about the redevelopment agreement, I think everyone in the community and those of us here on the dais as well are fatigued. And this is, at some point, we've got to just make the decision. And whether that means waiting for the redevelopment agreement, if that's what the council wants to do, that's fine. I'm fine doing that. But let's not drag that negotiation out a long time, because we do need to have some resolution to this.
That's sort of why I was hoping we would either go forward or not with this zoning agreement, because it is the first step. And if there is a negative vote on the zoning agreement, there's no reason to spend all that time and energy doing a redevelopment agreement.
But I see some of the things in the redevelopment agreement as points that can address some of the concerns. Not all of them, but some of them.
Well, and if that's the case, I'd be happy to ask my questions of what I want in the redevelopment agreement. If those can't be answered or they can't be answered in the manner that I think is appropriate, then I will know my way I'm gonna vote on this. In other words, we don't have to sit down in a room and negotiate. We can do it right here.
Well, right now, we don't have our attorney here to do that, right?
I think we all have our independent things that we want in a development agreement. And if the developer can't satisfy those, then I know how I'm gonna vote on the zoning.
Okay. Anything else? So let's get this straight now. We're going to do the second reading of this tonight, but we're going to postpone any vote on this until we do a redevelopment agreement.
No.
No, is that what that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that we're tying the two things together.
Madam Mayor, if I may, we next
Help me
meeting on
out.
the 16th, obviously, should the TIF commission act positively or affirmatively,
Yes,
the TIF recommendation would be in front of you on the 16th for first and second reading. We would also have a closed meeting with our council about the redevelopment agreement, which I think that lines up, and that this, should all things come together, either the first meeting or the second meeting in December, take your pick. We can work through that next step if we want to just take one step at a time. We could be prepared for actions on all three, or if the council decides just one and hold on to two as we continue negotiation.
okay,
I'm looking at our
so,
attorney to make sure.
I agree with you 100%.
so we're looking to at least wrap this up this year.
That's
Certainly
certainly,
can. It depends on, again, the conversations and the.
that's the goal.
negotiation.
That was the
That
conversation
was-
we had last week.
So the goal is to wrap this up by the end of the year. Okay,
The part of it,
The planning commission, I mean, this zoning is 9166. That was our goal. That was decided last meeting.
to hold that until we have the redevelopment agreement, correct? Is that what?
No, to hold it until we have it at least in process, so we have some better understanding of what can be included and what will be included there.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of the redevelopment agreement. It's the conversation around the redevelopment
the
agreement
process
underway. Okay,
Because, after we can approve the TIF, we can approve this Bill 9166. And after all of the entities make the inspections, MSD, I think they've already signed off, the Corps of Engineers, all the other entities, we still have the agreement to get through. And, regardless if we approve the TIF and planning, the zoning, we still have the agreement to get through to get out. It's just doing the pre-work we need to make a decision. That was discussed, actually, that's been the ongoing discussion, and that was actually what we decided on last meeting, just to have a time frame to get all of this done.
okay.
But I guess what I'm saying is they all, for me, despite them being separate votes, they're all one and the same.
Okay. Unfortunately, David, they're not, and you wasn't here last meeting to voice your opinion. But that's what the council timeline, the council decided on that time last meeting.
And I respect that decision, but I don't understand how I, as a council member, can make an educated and informed decision without that third piece, which is the finalized development. If I don't have that, I have no choice but to vote no.
Well, all I can tell you is throughout this entire process, the final piece of this work was the agreement. It never was going side by side with all the other tiers. The agreement was the final piece that the council would work on to get the final agreement with the developer.
I guess my follow-up question to you then, Councilman, is how can you make an informed decision without the development agreement? How can you make an informed decision about the first, about bill number 9166 or a TIF without the development agreement?
Thank you for asking the question, because 9166 bill went to our planning commission moved it forward to the council. Now, when my questions are answered, that things that I need to make an informed decision, when I see a traffic study, when I see what benefit is going to be to the city, what's going to happen with the buildings, when all of my issues have been answered, which most of them have, that's when I can make an informed decision on the planning commission, what they move forward, and with the TIF commission, if they move forward, then I can make my decision. I like to have all of my information in front of me, but I don't need to stop the progress of the process to make a final decision.
Okay, so here's what we know. We know that we will at the next meeting have the TIF commission vote.
Barring an unforeseen
Okay,
issue.
so,
yes.
all right. So then at the next meeting, we'll know what the TIF commission has to say, and that'll be another piece in the puzzle as we move forward into December with all of the other pieces of this together.
We will start the development agreement.
That's the
Okay.
timeline we had agreed upon last meeting.
Okay. Then let's do the second reading.
Bill 9166, second reading. In ordinance amending chapter 53 of the zoning code by changing the zoning from A4 7,500 square foot residence district B1, multiple family district E, industrial district, and PC planned commercial district to PC planned commercial district at the following addresses: 55 Lincoln Avenue, 62 Lincoln Avenue, 49 North Gore Avenue, 51 North Gore Avenue, 61 North Gore Avenue, 65 North Gore Avenue, 69 North Gore Avenue, 79 North Gore Avenue, 40 North Rock Hill Road, 200 Sherman Place, 201 Sherman Place, 203 Sherman Place, 205 Sherman Place, 207 Sherman Place, 200 West Kirkham, 204 West Kirkham, 234 West Kirkham, 240 West Kirkham, 242 West Kirkham, 320 West Kirkham, 340 West Kirkham, 107 West Pacific, 109 West Pacific, 111 West Pacific, 115 West Pacific, 125 West Pacific, 147 West Pacific, 207 West Pacific, 209 West Pacific, 211 West Pacific, 227 West Pacific, 315 West Pacific, 325 West Pacific, 341 West Pacific. It's a long street. On approximately 15.1 acre tract of land, and repealing ordinances 3835, 3900, 6467, 7320, 7369, 7424, and 7519, and matters related thereto.
Okay, so we'll put this on the next council agenda, and if we're ready to vote, we're ready to vote. If not, we'll push it off the third reading until the following meeting. All right, we're on to remarks of visitors, and I have one speaker card from Dave Buck. Is he still here?
Dave Buck, 124 South Elm, now for something completely different. Last city council meeting, a very good former council member asked, "What's going on at City Hall?" She was obviously entitled to her opinions, but I felt her criticisms, particularly of Marie and Eric, crossed the line in this public forum, especially when they were sitting right there and could not respond because of council's code of conduct during remarks. Which, Jerry, if you remember, I criticized you in 2002 and you remarked right away. So we may want to rethink that rule, because I think it's
You
good.
mean after 19 years? Yeah, maybe we should revisit
Maybe we
it.
The point is, as a spectator, I was mad. The same kind of mad I felt when Neil was unjustly jumped on and dumped on after his hiring as city attorney 2 years ago. As such, I would like to share a different perspective. I have lived in Webster Groves 20 years, and yesterday was one of my best days ever as Marie asked me to serve on the panel of 7 to help interview the 5 finalists for fire chief. In 20 years, nobody has ever asked me to serve on anything. And Marie, thank you so very much. The day could not have gone better. The process was flawless and fun. Everybody played a role. The candidates were awesome. I have my particular favorite. And Eric was our good shepherd and dressed in, yes, casual attire. Unbelievable. So what's going on at City Hall? Well, I'll tell you, leadership, that's what, provided in large part by Marie and Eric. I am a promote from within guy. I always have been, and I was a little suspect when Marie and Eric were brought in from the outside, but no longer. Because in a very short period of time, and from one resident's perspective, they have worked tirelessly, in my opinion, to elevate City Hall's leadership, sound thinking, discipline, organization, coordination, communication, technology, processes, and most importantly, action in tackling the city's top challenges and moving us forward, such as the annual budget, the diversity, equity, inclusion work, first time ever strategic planning, Douglas Hill, the TIF Commission, fire chief research, search, and the list goes on. What's abundantly clear to me is that they have, like Neil before them, they have earned our trust. They know what they are doing. They are doing a great job, and we are lucky to have them on our side. That's what is going on in City Hall. And I, for one, cannot wait to see what happens next. Marie, Eric, and even Neil, my hat is off to all of you.
Thank you, Dave. All right, we're going on to, oh, we have a hand up. Okay.
Clark, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, Clark.
I don't know why I have to follow Dave Buck always. Very hard to do. But I also have kudos to the city manager, the staff, the mayor, and the entire city council for diving into the strategic planning and addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. In my opinion, we need a good dose of both of those in our fair city. Who are we? How did we get here? Where do we want to go? That's all really, really important stuff. So thank you very much for diving into that. And we all know it's very hard to always live your values. As a student of history, I spend a lot of time reading about and researching the how did we get here question. I think some of the inequities we see in our community didn't just happen. The built systems worked exactly as planned and set up, and thus we need to understand what happened and what to do and what we can do to both heal the wounds and to move forward as a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. There are 2 things I believe the city could do relatively quickly that I think would go a long way towards education, as well as openly addressing who we strive to be as a community, I hope. The first is addressing land acknowledgement. And Mayor, I really appreciate you bringing that up today in the work session. It's really more than just an Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's something that a lot of cities and organizations are doing across the country. And I really hope we take it seriously and form a committee to research and come up with a policy to acknowledge and honor and hopefully reconnect with those that came before us on this soil that we call Webster Groves. The second idea will be somewhat more controversial, just like you guys need some more controversy in your lives. But my hope is that excellent conversations, education takes place, research, discernment, followed by our cities replacing all street names named for people that enslaved human beings with names that honor people that were ahead of their time in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. I understand that some of those streets are named after our city's founders, and that was a totally different era. I get that. But why do we honor them today? I'm not about changing history, but I'm all about living our values visually and in practice. If we truly are interested in DEI, I think we should change those street names, Lockwood, Bompart, etc. How cool would it be to walk, cycle, or drive on streets named after people like Rosa Parks, Emmeline Pankhurst, Frank Kemery? Think about that. And taking these bold steps, I think, will go a long way towards healing and living our lives and living our values by honoring and hopefully reconciling with those that were forced off these lands, as well as honoring people ahead of their time, working tirelessly towards a society that we just today
Thank you, Clark.
are
Thanks
trying to be here in Webster Groves. Thank you.
very much. Appreciate it. All right. I think that's it for the hands up. Okay, so we'll move on. Under new business, we have resolution 2021-60. Could I ask for one of the council members to postpone that reading until November the 16th?
Yes, Mayor, I move that we postpone the discussion of, do we have? an ordinance?
Resolution 2021.
Resolution 2021-60 for a later meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Let's call for the vote.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welsh.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Yes, well, we hopefully will bring this up at our next council meeting. Does anyone care to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Do we need to do this other part, though?
Yes, well, there's we don't have a time frame. We can do that at the same time, Katie. So there's the certification that Katie has done of the count. So the signature count has been determined. So we broke this up, the analysis of the charter, proposed charter amendment, into two parts. One of them was whether there were sufficient signatures by electors as required by Article 15 of our charter. And there were sufficient signatures. The second part of that was the legal sufficiency. So again, the certification is there. We're prepared to do it, but I would recommend we do it at the same time that we do the resolution. Are you okay with that, Katie? Or you want to do it
Well,
now?
I believe it did say that I needed to report it at the next regular meeting.
That's fine. Then if that's the case, take up.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, okay.
And then parlay into the resolution at the next meeting. I would feel more comfortable.
That's fine.
Okay, what do we need to do, Katie?
Neil, if you want to start.
Yes.
your-
So I indicated that there was a petition for charter amendments that had been filed. We needed to have the city clerk certify to the council that a sufficient number of electors have signed the proposed charter amendment petitions that were filed. The petition itself has been submitted to the St. Louis County Election Board to determine whether they had an adequate number of signature of registered voters as is required by our charter. And then the city clerk reviewed each of the petitions for the statement of circulators.
And thank you, Neil. Then as required by the charter, I am hereby certifying to the council the results of the determination by me and upon the advice of the city attorney as to the sufficiency or insufficiency of the charter amendment petition filed on November 8th, 2021 in my office related to amending Article 11 and Article 15 of the city charter. The determination contained in the certification, which is hereby entered into the minutes of the November 2nd, 2021 council meeting, the first regular meeting since completing the examination of the petitions, is that the petition contains the required number of electors' signature and is procedurally sufficient under the charter. And then the city attorney will address the other issue with the resolution at the next meeting.
Yes,
Thank you.
And this is sufficient.
yes, it is.
Thank you. All right, does anybody care to remove anything from the consent agenda? If not, Councilmember Smith, could you call for its approval?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welsh.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right. Are we going to need a closed session?
Yes, ma'am. we do.
Okay, but before we do that, let me do the boards and members.
3.
Okay, we have appointed Corin Purcell to the Green Space Advisory Board. We've reappointed Bob Buckman to the Architectural Review Board. We've appointed Centron Felder to the Police Community Engagement Board and Michael Johnson to the Parks and Recreation Commission.
And Kyle Wilson.
I think we got it all now. If you would call for
Yes,
the-
Mayor, I'd like to move for an executive closed session under number one, attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open paren one, close paren, and number three, personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open paren three, close paren.
Second.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welsh.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yep.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right, are we gonna do that in here?
My understanding was we're doing it over in
We're going in
Going
there?
over there?
Okay.